across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A lot of tiffing going on. Welcome. It is the home of common sense, and good afternoon. We've got loads here. Badenoch, by the way, challenging Keir Starmer to work together on a plan to cut the welfare bill. Could this be the beginning of a Tory-Labour love-in, a coalition even? Would you support it? I think I might know the answer, but we'll give it a go, and we'll open the lines on that. Meanwhile, the race to replace Angela Rayner as Labour's deputy leader now has 4 contenders. Lucy Powell, her name is in the ring. Emily Thornberry, Bridget Phillipson, and Belle Ribeiro Addy. Me neither. They are the 4 so far. There could be more to come. And all of England's worst-performing hospitals have been named and shamed in a damning government analysis showing that 80% are failing on performance targets, like the obvious, waiting times, etc., or they're running financial deficits. How does this monolith ever get reconstructed to the point where it actually works for all? We'll have more on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. That's the same number. If you want to drop us a voice note as well, 87222. If you are messaging. Thank you to Jonathan Gullis, who was here yesterday, filling in brilliantly on the programme. We continue in fine form. I am going to ask that question: would you vote for a Labour Conservative coalition? We understand that Kemi Badenoch's going to challenge Keir Starmer, or has challenged Keir Starmer, to work with the Tories on this plan, specifically to cut the welfare bill. Now, this is a kind of opposition technique. It makes you look like you're open to do business and you're fair. Look, you might be the opposition party, but you know, we will work with the government. The Tories are offering to work. It's like a big fat olive branch being handed over the dispatch boxes from Badenoch to Starmer. Work with us. We're willing to work with you. And of course, in a way, it's a kind of trick question. It's a bear trap of a question, because the Prime Minister is never going to say, yeah, we'll work with the Conservatives, shall we? That's a good idea. We'll get into bed with another party on something as crucial as welfare reforms. So she said that his only chance of getting significant welfare savings through the Commons is by working with the Tories. Now, she is mathematically right about that. Look at what happened the last time they tried to save about 3p off the welfare business, where you had lefties squealing and discombobulating all over the place, crying into their communist manifestos and God knows what else. It was an absolute horror show, to the point they had to not so much boil it down, dilute it, they had to pretty much get rid of it. So there were no fundamental or meaningful welfare reforms, and so the deficit stayed where it was. Rachel Reeves's idea of being able to cull certain elements of that department came to nothing. So you've got Badenoch suggesting kind of cross-party committee to draw up savings programmes that are in, quote, the national interest, and inviting Keir Starmer, Pat McFadden and Rachel Reeves for talks. And of course, this is despite her party voting against Labour's welfare cuts this summer. Because they were going to vote against. Of course they were going to vote against them. Their argument when they vote against something is, it's this. It's not that we're against the idea of welfare cuts, we're just against the way you are doing it. And when you often hear people using that as it's often said the Tories voted against the beginning of the NHS back in the 40s. Well, apart from the fact that it was the Tories that first had a white paper on the NHS, Henry Willink, I think his name was, he was a health minister back in the 1940s for the Tories, first suggested having essentially a national health service. But of course, if they put it together and it's not the one you had in mind, you then vote against it. Doesn't mean you're against the principle. Now, what's interesting to me about this, bearing in mind that last time they were talking about welfare cuts, they were trying to shave 5 billion quid off the bill, and the rebellion that Labour was about to suffer was so great, it would have been so humiliating, they reversed it. So, OK, we won't do that then. And of course, the welfare system is one specific area where you absolutely need to save some money. I don't know, and I can't imagine, and I'm sure over a pint or two with your mates, you might have had this same conversation. What does this thing look like in 10 years' time, 20 years, 30 years' time? What sort of tax are we going to have to pay just to keep the welfare system going? That doesn't include the NHS and defence and education and all the other stuff, just welfare payments, people on the sick, people who can't work through whatever reason, and of course an ageing population. I mean, it's off the scale, this thing, and it's only getting worse. I mean, the numbers are jaw-dropping, they're horrifying. So it's a good idea to say, do you know what, some things are so important in life, so crucial, that you have to do this cross-party, but you then somewhat dilute the entire point of having a government elected in. Which rather brings me to the point in question, is do we need to almost have an entire reset on how Parliament does business? Because there are so many fundamental issues. You think this shouldn't be the work of, it shouldn't be a vanity project of a specific party. These things are in the national interest. Now, again, I know we vote for the party of preference, and the one that has the most votes, they win the election. That's democracy. That's how it works. Do we need to revisit that and say there must be a better way of doing this when it comes to big fundamental issues like going to war or saving billions that need to be saved on welfare, issues around the national health? We were talking there just a moment ago, and we'll cover this a little later, where you've got 80% of NHS trusts that are either failing on performance, like waiting lists, or are running a financial deficit. That kind of stuff should be beyond the remit of just a party. That's got to be something bigger than that. There's 650-odd MPs in Parliament. We must be able to do a better job. However, notionally, would you vote for a Labour Conservative coalition? 0344 499 1000. Would you give that a go? Would it work for you, even if you had to kind of hold your nose while you did it? And of course, I doubt, looking at the current polling numbers, that you would have a Conservative Labour... I mean, it wouldn't happen anyway, by the way, it's hypothetical. But I guess it does feed into that question of, do we need more cross-party consensus or business or meaningful dialogue between party leaders to get stuff through? Because all that happens, one party comes up with something and then opposition parties naturally oppose it. Even if they agree with it, they oppose it. That's how it works. It's a game. It's like something out of Roblox. You've got to try and, humiliate the person you're playing against. And the more humiliation, the more votes they lose, the more you look better, and potentially you go on to win. 0344 499 1000. How would you reform our parliamentary system to make it more democratic? I'll ask that question as well, because I think that's kind of key to this notional question of, would you vote for a Labour Conservative coalition? We've got loads of voices on this as well. 0344 499 1000. Lines are open on that. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Candice Holdsworth is back with us, journalist and broadcaster. Candice, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. So let's start with this Badenoch challenge. She's saying to Keir Starmer, work with the Conservatives on a plan to cut welfare. Let's have a listen to what she said earlier today.
There are some people in government who must know that things need to change. You can picture their faces looking at the latest OBR figures, but the truth is they came into government with no real plans for how to save money, only how to spend it. That's why they are in trouble. And that is why today I am making the Prime Minister a serious offer, because the Conservative Party will always act in the national interest. If he is serious about cutting spending and really bringing down the welfare bill, we will help him. The last time he tried this in July, the Prime Minister was humiliated by his own backbenchers. He had to gut a bill just 90 minutes before MPs were due to vote on it.
And, of course, she didn't vote for it either, Candice. Interesting, I just got a message from Steve in Tenbury Wells who says the Tories were useless, Labour are useless. A coalition of the two would be doubly useless, which is not a bad analysis, frankly.
Yeah, it's exactly like you said. I mean, people vote, but what do they get? Do the parties deliver on what people want and what people vote for? And I think one of the big problems we've got at the moment is we've got a democratic system, but the parties we elect no longer represent just the ordinary, down-to-earth, common-sense values of ordinary people. I mean, look at the immigration issue. Look how tortured that became when the Conservatives were in power. I mean, there was something like the Rwanda scheme, which had worked well in other countries like Australia and the US. And it was actually opposed most vigorously by Conservative MPs. Yeah. And you would think if you voted for the Conservative Party that you would get Conservative policies on immigration, but you don't. And as for the Labour Party, I mean, their claims to being the party of the working class, I mean, we all know that's just a big fat joke. I mean, they have long departed from that. I mean, they are still the party of Jeremy Corbyn. It's just in the last election they kept very quiet about it because they knew how much it would put people off. So, I mean, I think Kemi Badenoch, I mean, this offer is just going to be laughed at by Labour. Labour love to hate the Conservatives, even if it's just to performatively hate them. Yep. They need to have someone to blame for everything, and they will never, ever, ever work with them. I think the problem is with Kemi Badenoch as well is, I don't know, she's sort of a diminished authority figure herself. I mean, the Conservatives are absolutely tanking in the polls. Many in the party are even questioning her leadership. I mean, that's what I get whenever I'm around, people involved with the Conservative Party. So she's not really in a very strong position, although mathematically, when you look at it, if they were to vote for this for welfare reform, it would help Labour, but Labour will never, ever, ever be seen to be holding hands with the Conservatives, if they can help it.
And of course, I suppose part of the theory of this, it makes the Tories look as if they're being fair and look at us, we want to work together, knowing that the answer is going to be no. So it leaves Kemi Badenoch say, well, we offered to help, but Keir Starmer turned it down. And that's ultimate. I mean, they would have known this before they even came up with the suggestion. I think the wider issue, though, Candice, if we look back at 2010, when the coalition was formed, we were talking about this a couple of shows ago, where obviously the Lib Dems were the kingpin in all of this. They could have gone with Labour. They ended up going with the Conservatives. And many people at the time said, well, why don't the Conservatives and the Labour just get together? But that will never, ever happen. But there's no constitutional reason why it can't happen.
No, it just, I mean, I think that they're just like magnets that repulse each other. I just don't think happen. I think that if they were to form a government, it would probably collapse within 1 week. They could never work together. They just can't. It's an impossibility. And I think you're right in so many ways, the way that these parties are so ideological and not common sense. I mean, it's worse for the people, right? Like, we don't get what we want, and that's why there's such a massive sense of dissatisfaction, because you have a political class, or even the bureaucracy that runs the country, that are just involved with their own internal issues, and they've stopped focusing on just what we want and why we vote for them, and it's such an issue.
100%. Let's move to this story. British workers taking the highest number of sick days in over 15 years, averaging nearly 2 full working weeks off. We've got ill again, Candice. We're ill. We're lepers. We don't know how to function in a healthy world these days. Why are we all sick? This survey blamed an ageing workforce, long-term health conditions with mental health, now the main cause of long absences. What is happening to our brains?
I know. The thing is things like anxiety and depression have always been massively prevalent. I mean, you're more likely to get anxious or depressed than you are to get one of life's real dreaded diseases. But the problem now is that we subsidize people to stay off work for them. So it used to be, these were things that were quite horrible, but you tried to manage them. Things like work, going out, walking through it, being resilient. Those were seen as the best ways to manage stuff like anxiety and depression. Now we tell people, sit at home, don't go to your job, don't engage with ordinary life, and we'll pay you to do it. And number one, economically, it's not going to work. That's how we're going to lead the country into absolute bankruptcy and ruin. It's already happening now. Yeah. And two, it doesn't help people when they're suffering from these things. Isolating yourself at home, not having any purpose, not having any meaning. It's actually not a kind thing to do at all. You're enabling someone. I mean, I know people who've suffered with serious, mental health disorders, and the best thing for them was to be out there in the world earning money so you can feel proud of yourself and having meaning and purpose and something to get up for every single morning. Otherwise, I think people can collapse into very, very bad habits. I think it's becoming easier and easier now, though. And I think a lot of it is led by the public sector. particularly to get sick notes or for people to say, oh, you're feeling anxious today, don't worry, stay at home. And that actually doesn't build resilience in any way. I mean, we know that. I mean, I can't believe I even need to say that. But, you know, I think at age like my age, mid to late 30s, people do feel a huge amount of anxiety because they've got so much responsibility and obligation. But you can't just pack it all in.
But having anxiety is not a disability in that sense. I mean, obviously, there's gradients, and there are people whose anxiety is so off the scale it tips into other challenging areas. Full sympathy and understanding of that. But I think we're kind of living in a world, aren't we, where a bit of anxiety is enough to take a day off work, which would it'd have been unthinkable 20 years ago.
Oh, definitely. I mean, people just would not have seen it. It's becoming more acceptable now. And in some ways that's good, right? Like the stigma around mental illness is largely disappeared, but you have to be so careful, like I said, that it doesn't tip into a culture of enabling. And I think that's what we forget when it comes to mental health conditions, anxiety, depression, is that actually learning to manage them and learning to navigate the world while still struggling with them is better. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine over the summer. She's a child psychologist, and she said that most of the kids she sees, they suffer from things like anxiety, but her approach is never to remove them from school or to take them away from the things that are making them anxious. It's actually to help them to learn to cope with it so that when they're adults, they've got those skills. And I think most people who work in the psychology profession know this, but a lot of ordinary people don't. And I think it's time we learn that we start seeing it differently. It's not cruel to ask people to carry on with their lives.
Well, listen, we'll throw that question out as well. Candice, thank you very much. Stay with us. We're back with more from Candice Holdsworth in just a few minutes. What is behind Britain's sickness epidemic? 2 weeks a year on issues. People are throwing a sickie. What's happened there? We've got 1 in 4 people now live with a life-limiting disability. These are very real cases. 8.7 million disabled of working age. That's up 2 million in 5 years. 2 million in 5 years. What the hell has happened? You'd think by now, at this stage in the 21st century, the human race would be healthier than they've ever been, because we have so much information about being healthy. We live in a world where it's on tap. Get fit, get to the gym, mindfulness, jog around the block, anything you like. We know all the info. We've got all the answers. We've got all the workshops. We've got all the advice. We've got the daytime TV shows, social media screaming at you how to live better, how to have a better lifestyle, and yet we're still on the wonk when it comes to our health. How the hell did that happen? 0344 499 1000. Plus that question, what would you make of a Labour Conservative coalition? Could you ever see that happening? Would it work? But it's a feeder question, really, into the wider issue of whether we need more cross-party functionality in Parliament when it comes to the big issues of our time. Crazy you allow one party to sort out fundamentals like the welfare system and sickness, when you've got another 400 MPs sitting there from other parties who could probably help. That's a case of rewiring our entire system, by the way, but maybe that's what it needs. 0344 499 1000.
They're not just a family, they're an institution. And I love the monarchy. I believe in the monarchy from afar, from a foreign country that fought a war not to have it. And they can't, it's not just about a family, it's about protecting the future of the monarchy and the institution for not only Prince William, but Prince George. King Charles knows that he's jeopardizing that with any sort of meeting with Prince Harry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
One from Steve in Cambridge says politicians are like kids in the playground. We need serious politicians that act for citizens, not themselves. As for a coalition, never, says Steve. I mean, it would be a bloody mess, wouldn't it? You imagine. The kind of Lib Dem Tory thing in 2010, remember, this was sort of post-financial crash era. The theory of it is kind of sound. But the implementation is always tricky. So there were loads of stuff the Tories were never really able to put into action, stuff that was in their manifesto that was just cut off at the pass because they found themselves in coalition. The greatest beneficiaries were the Lib Dems. I mean, they had, what, 59 MPs, and they got 75% of their manifesto, which they never in a gazillion years thought they'd ever be in government. 75% of a manifesto with 59 MPs into the statute books. It happened. That's extraordinary. Candice Holdsworth is with us looking at the big stories of the day. Here's another one, Candice. New government analysis. All of England's worst performing hospitals have been named and shamed. Now, remember, I think it was Wes Streeting, that's the fella, who had a promise to improve hospitals as quickly as possible after the general election. Let's have a listen to what the Health Secretary said.
I want to see the new hospitals programme completed, but I am not prepared to offer people false hope about how soon they will benefit from the facilities that they deserved. That's why I've asked officials, as a matter of urgency, to report to me on the degree to which the programme is funded, along with a realistic timetable for delivery.
Well, I appreciate, Candice, you can't do everything in half an hour, I know that, but it'd be nice to see a few scintillas of light at the moment, and we're not seeing any.
Yes, I'm really glad, though, that, you know, there is sort of that, there used to be this culture of never criticising the NHS. And I'm glad now that a Labour MP is saying, hang on a minute, we need to speak honestly about it, because it's not some sacred political totem. It's a service that actually cares for people when they're sick, and we need to be able to speak about it honestly and openly. I mean, I've written a lot about the failures in maternity care, and we know that, I mean, maternity care in this country is absolutely appalling. It has it pays the biggest amount in compensation in the developed world. That's how bad. I mean, the outcomes are absolutely appalling. We spend almost nothing on it. And we need to be able to talk about this. I mean, for many years, just like, you know, something that you couldn't say anything about, even if you emerged from care. I mean, worse off than when you went in. So absolutely that needs to change. No institution should exist that's beyond criticism. We'll see what happens. I mean, you know, as with everything with Labour, I just feel like they're very ideologically constrained. You know, they'll go so far, but not far enough. You know, they can't just follow the facts and the evidence. They always have to appeal to all these, you know, mad fanatical people who are so divorced from how ordinary people feel and think about things.
Yeah, spot on. Let's move to Labour's front bench. And, of course, it is the race to replace Rayner. Bridget Phillips and Lucy Powell have entered the race to become the deputy leader. This morning, Wes Streeting spoke about who might be in the running. He actually said that the next deputy leader should ideally be a woman. Here he is.
I think ideally, I think it's good if you've got a balanced leadership team, and we've got some brilliant women who are putting themselves forward women who are government ministers, women who are on our backbenches. And, you know, one thing I'd say beyond the deputy leadership, you look at the cabinet that Keir Starmer's surrounded himself with, first time in history, actually, that all of the so-called great offices of state, your Chancellor, your Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary, are all women for the first time.
All women for the first time. We could add into that list as well Candice, Emily Thornberry. She's put herself forward, and an MP called Belle Ribeiro Addy. Wasn't familiar with her, but she's the MP for Clapham and Brixton. There you go. She's probably Finn's MP, I think. As she describes herself as a socialist, a feminist, and anti-racist. Isn't it funny when somebody feels the need to put anti-racist, as if you might put racist?
Yeah.
I mean, this is how these people roll. It's a delightful quartet at the moment of brilliant, heady levels of mediocrity that are putting their hat into the ring. What are you making of it?
I agree. I mean, it is just so patronising. Someone should not be there because of their sex. They should be there because they're the absolute best person for the job. And what a mundane thing for me to say. But, you know, when they talk like this, I mean, look what happened with Rachel Reeves, right, when she was made Chancellor of the Exchequer. And everyone was saying, wow, the first woman to do this job. Now everyone's saying she's breaking the economy, basically. Yeah. I mean, it matters not one bit what your chromosomes are. It matters whether or not you can do the job. And like, women will never progress if we're thought of in this way. You know, as if we're, you know, little children that have to be indulged and given little toys to play with. No, absolutely not. Like you say, the four of them do not fill me with hope. I think Emily Thornberry could possibly be the worst person that they could pick. Deputy, with all the flag wars stuff going on, and like the way that the Keir Starmer's trying to wrap.
I know, and it's just as you rightly say, when Rachel Reeves, when she first got the job, and she kept talking about being the first woman, and I thought, well, mate, this is irrelevant now. Why are you talking about this? We've had 3 female prime ministers throughout the last bunch of years, all of them Conservatives, as it turns out. That you haven't broken a glass ceiling here, Rach, in any shape or form, and you know it shouldn't be based on that. But at the moment, it does seem there's only 4 female voices that have put their names forward. Will this change very much? If it's a arch left winger, it could be a pain in the butt for Keir Starmer, though.
Yes, it could be. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Keir Starmer is constantly trying to portray himself as some sort of, you know, centrist pragmatist, but he's not. I mean, he spent most of his life on the really, really radical left. So, I mean, he all these things as well. He just, you know, keeps quite quiet about it, and then we just get a shock when some like insane policy is announced, or they do something that no one can understand why they're doing it. I mean, that is the Labour Party. That is just the reality of the Labour Party. And I do not say this as some party political person, you know, who's got my own political axe to grind. You know, I have to live in this country too, and I really dislike being ruled by ideologues. And what I also don't like is, you know, the way we're all supposed to say how wonderful they are all the time. You know, it's always talking in terms of identity characteristics as well. You know, they're a woman, they came from this background, blah, 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 rather than how it should be, just basic competency. No one would say, if you worked for a company and your CEO was, you know, a woman from this background, no, they would be like, you know, can she make us money or can she lose us money? And that's what it would be about.
Yeah, spot on. Candice, thank you. We hit the clock. Great to have you with us as ever. Candice Holdsworth, journalist and broadcaster with us on the programme. Chris in Northumberland says, Ian, had to pull the car over because when you said the phrase Labour Conservative Coalition, I almost crashed and experienced the worst road rage I've ever had. Says Chris. I get it. I understand it. I apologise for spewing such ludicrous notions and, frankly, disturbing imagery of what that might look like. I get it. And I apologise profusely to Chris and others who had to pull over and take a few deep breaths and maybe 2 tons of oxygen to get them back into shape. Thank you for that. More from you on the way. What would you make of a Labour Conservative coalition? Could they beat Reform? I mean, in terms of the numbers, they could. You'd never see it. It's a notional question. It feeds into the wider issue of reforming how we do politics, with Kemi Badenoch saying to Labour, we'll work with you on welfare reform. Labour are saying, sod off, basically. 0344 499 1000. It's 1:30. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Kemi Badenoch at the centre of this story. She's challenged Prime Minister Keir Starmer to work with the Conservatives on a plan to cut the soaring welfare bill. It's a kind of bit of a bear trap of a question, isn't it, to say to the government, we'll work with you. And, of course, the government say, well, probably not. She's warned Labour faces a stark choice, cooperate with the Tories or hit taxpayers with punishing tax rises. All sort of makes sense. Is it doable? Labour have already admitted welfare spending is unsustainable, with 1.1 million more universal claimants and costs set to top 100 billion by 2030. And of course it will keep going upwards. So notionally speaking, could it be the beginning of a Tory-Labour coalition, and would you support it? Lots of voices to talk to on this. Firstly, Jack Elsom, he's of course political editor at The Sun. Jack, good afternoon to you. It's funny, isn't it, when they talk about coalitions, I was referring back to 2010 a moment ago. You know, the Lib Dems were the decision makers, if you like. Do they go with Labour? Do they go with went with the Tories in the end? And there were a few people, well, why don't Labour and the Tories just get together? Of course, it will never happen, but constitutionally, I mean, it technically could happen.
Yeah, we saw the same thing happen in Germany, where the CDU and the SDP, essentially the equivalents of the Labour and Conservative parties, did end up in some grand coalition. I can't see it happening here, I don't think. I think there's too much water under the bridge. Yeah. I think there's too much bad blood between both of them. But it is interesting here, like you said, essentially, this is a political gambit by Kemi Badenoch to essentially punch Keir Starmer's bruises and emphasise the fact that at the moment, he is too weak to even get through pretty minuscule savings in the welfare bill. Your viewers will remember a few months ago when they tried to get just £5 billion worth of cuts to that £100 billion figure. Yeah. So actually, it's not really a cut at all in the welfare bill. It's just making it go up less quickly than it already is meant to. And they couldn't even do that. They were forced to fill it the entire thing after about 100 of their own backbenchers said they were going to vote against it. And so Kemi Badenoch saying that we will let you get it through on the backs of Tory votes obviously would be incredibly uncomfortable, probably even unpalatable to Keir Starmer. So she's really trying to twist the knife in with this one rather than actually offer, I think, some constructive opposition.
And of course, as I said at the beginning, Jack, it's a bit of a bear trap of a question. It's an old classic in many respects, in that you offer to help. So you look kind of like the good guys in a way. Look, you know, we did our best to work together, knowing that the government can only answer no to that question.
Yes, and what Kemi Badenoch did last time, she actually deployed a similar ploy in the last one. She said that we will help get it through, but, and there was a big but, it was not just a blank check. And what she said is that we will get this through if you promise that you will not put up taxes at the budget. Obviously, that is something which Keir Starmer cannot promise, because it seems that Rachel Reeves will probably end up having to put up taxes. You know, at the moment, she's totally boxed in. They seem to have really given up on meaningful spending cuts, despite Pat McFadden saying they're going to have another stab at the welfare bill. But in terms of like broad spending cuts, it seems that's off the table. Growth's not coming to save them, because growth is pretty minuscule in the grand scheme of things. She can't borrow any more money because she's sticking to these fiscal rules. And so the only thing really which is going to be able to get her a green tick from the OBR at November's budget is some tax rises. And for millions of Brits out there who are already saddling the biggest tax burden since the Second World War, it's going to be incredibly infuriating.
100%. And of course, it should be said that the Conservatives voted against the welfare bill anyway, didn't they? I know it never ended up being anything like it was set out to be. It was diluted beyond recognition, really.
Yeah, exactly. And because Keir Starmer said that he wasn't going to meet Kemi Badenoch's demands the last time, after there was an absolute clown show where the bill was being gutted in real time on the House of Commons floor by recently sacked Welfare Secretary Liz Kendall. And the Conservatives said, actually, you know what, we're not going to vote for this at all. We agree with the principle of drastically cutting the benefits bill, but not like this. And I think that it's interesting because Kemi Badenoch seems to have spied an opening here. She's found it very, very difficult to assert herself in the political arena because there's not much gaps. Obviously, she has the baggage of the past 14 years, migration, a big, vulnerability of the government, but she's being outflanked by reform in that. So I think she sees the economy now as her main point of attack because she is saying that both reform and Labour are not economically credible. We've seen Nigel Farage saying that, he would make sweeping tax cuts. He would actually, lift the two-child benefit cap, something that Kemi Badenoch doesn't want to do. So she is spying that as a bit of clear blue water between both sides. And it's so difficult for her at the moment because she has to really face both ways. She's being, outflanked, obviously, in the centre and the left in terms of Labour, and then obviously on the right as well with reform. So I think the economy, you can expect her to talk about much more in the months and I dare to say years to come, but with the caveat that she might not have years and actually she might not have months.
And the problem is as well, I suppose, for Kemi Badenoch, it's not as if she's riding high herself. I mean, if she was in this very sort of credible position, I was thinking back to, if you go back to 1997, I know you and I were only about 2 at the time, but nonetheless...
speak for yourself. I think I was minus 22.
I was about to say, Jack, I think you beat me on that one. But when Blair did anything like this and said, we'll work with it, Blair was the guy that was riding high in the polls. He was about to become the Prime Minister. So it was said with there was a certain kudos, a certain credibility when he spoke this way. With Kemi Badenoch, she's not just lagging in the polls, she's 3rd and in some cases 4th in the polls. I mean, she's in a terrible position. So it makes it even harder for any suggestion she might come up with, even if it sounds on the face of it, fairly reasonable stuff. We're the opposition, we'll work with you. It's hard to make that stick when you're Kemi.
It's just so difficult for her at the moment because irrelevance breeds irrelevance. And I think that the worse that you do in the polls, the less you are mentioned by the media, but not just them, but also by other parties as well. Like we saw in Cabinet today, Keir Starmer making a big ploy about attacking Nigel Farage, Rachel Reeves coming out, calling Nigel Farage a clown. Keir Starmer yesterday at the Parliamentary Labour Party, really going on the attack with 2 parties, the Greens and Reform, and the fact that Kemi Badenoch isn't even in the mix there. She was asked about this at the press conference earlier, and she says that she's just getting on with her job, which is fine. The problem is that at the moment, a lot of supporters just want Kemi Badenoch to come up with some genuine policies which they can rally around. Think about something like the ECHR, for example. What is your question? What is your position on leaving the ECHR? Labour say we're staying in. Reform say we're staying out. We're going to leave. And Kemi says, we're commissioning a review to see if it's legally possible to leave the ECHR, and we'll get back to you in a few months' time. And so I understand her point, which is that after, a pretty torrid time at the last election, she wants to be pretty methodical. She wants to take time to carefully consider policies rather than just throwing any old stuff out there. And you can be sympathetic with that. But in mainstream modern political debate, a lot of people want answers very quickly, and they want the sugar rush of answers. Yeah. And I think that's really damaging her in the polls at the moment.
100%. Listen, Jack, always great informative stuff from you. Thank you. Jack Elson is political editor over there at The Sun. Thank you to Jack. Let's talk to Peter Franklin, who's written on this issue, writer with Unheard. Afternoon to you, Peter. I mean, when you talk about coalitions or you think about coalitions on paper, it all sounds like a rather sensible idea. What could go wrong? A combination, a collective of different minds from different parts of the political spectrum. It's a lovely notion. But of course, it's almost like a chimpanzee birthday party when it comes together, because, these are people with a belly full of ambitions that are governed by their own politics. And most of the time, they can't get beyond that. So they tend to, as we see it around the world, I mean, the 2010 one in this country sort of worked all right, oddly, in some respects. Not everybody's cup of tea, but there wasn't any massive fallouts in some senses, but around the world they've kind of fallen at the first hurdle.
Yes, well, the last time we had Labour and Conservative cooperating in government in peacetime was 1931, I think.
Wow. Yeah.
And
like a century ago now.
Yes, and obviously that was Ramsay MacDonald who brought in the Tories because of the financial crisis, and his reward was to be seen as the great traitor of the Labour movement. But he was forced to by a financial situation. And Labour is getting uncomfortably close to that sort of situation again.
And it does seem that, again, as I was just saying to Jack on this point, I mean, it seems like it's a political manoeuvre, isn't it, from Kemi Badenoch to say, you know, we'll help you, knowing that Keir Starmer's never going to say, oh, thank goodness for that, Kemi. You know, it was all going pear-shaped, and now you've come along. I can see the sunny uplands ahead of us. That's never going to happen. But it does, I mean, for me, when I read these kind of stories, it forces me into sort of wondering, Peter, whether we need to almost recalibrate the entire parliamentary and kind of political system in some senses, because it should make sense that on big fundamental issues, parties get together and talk about it.
Yeah, and by now we should start expecting the unexpected.
Yeah.
You know, we are in an unprecedented situation in which a political party, Reform, has come from virtually nowhere to take a very substantial lead in the polls. And for the established parties, that is an existentially significant emergency. And even if they haven't quite internalised that, the closer we get to the election without a big shift in the polls back to the established parties, they're going to start panicking and they're going to start thinking the unthinkable.
Yeah.
And faced with wipeout by Reform, which is possible, look at the current projections in the polls, and they're now showing both the Conservatives and Labour dropping down to double figures in terms of number of MPs after the next election. They may think, my goodness, we have to do something completely unprecedented just to survive.
Just to survive, yeah.
Just to survive.
And that's the place they're in. This is a party that had a massive majority, of course. I mean, it would be unthinkable a year ago or so that we would even be talking in these terms when someone's got a landslide in their pocket.
Well, it should have been thinkable because they got that landslide with an astonishingly low percentage of the vote, 34%. I was one of the very few commentators to say at the beginning of the election that there is a nightmare scenario here for Starmer, which is a substantial victory, but with, you know, well under 40% of the votes.
Yep.
And the nightmare turned out to be much worse than
even than you'd said, Peter. Yeah.
And, you know, they are now staring utter disaster in the face. You look at the election map on, you know, there's sites like Electoral Calculus and all of these other polling sites that generate these fantastic maps of the possible election result. Labour is now looking at only two heartlands left, right? Two substantial patches of red, that sort of inner London and Merseyside. That's it.
Wow.
They get wiped out completely in the northeast. Unbelievable. And Reform make major inroads in the Welsh valleys. Also quite unbelievable, unprecedented. At some point, as I say, they have to start panicking and they have to start drawing up not a plan B, but a plan Z, because they're in that much trouble.
Indeed. Peter, great insight from you. Thank you. Really nice to speak. Peter Franklin, a writer with Unheard. I want to get a word from Nigel Fletcher as well, political historian, King's College London, also the co-founder of the Centre for Opposition Studies. Good afternoon to you, Nigel.
Good afternoon.
It's a bit of a mess out there, of course, isn't it? And I keep going back to 2010. The coalition we had then, which, look, lots of things happened that weren't to everyone's liking. But in terms of the management of that coalition, you had the kind of fantastic four of George Osborne, Cameron, Danny Alexander. What happened to Danny Alexander, by the way? And, of course, Nick Clegg. We know where he went. And it kind of sort of, this quartet did, in a management sense, it did sort of work.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised by how effective the coalition was as a government. As you say, they managed to find a way of the quad kind of managing day-to-day business as a sort of inner cabinet. But if you think back to the aftermath of that election in 2010, where we had those sort of 10 days or so of kind of wrangling of the parties in the Cabinet Office before we came up with this agreement, in the immediate aftermath of it, you had lots of commentators saying it'll never last. There's no way these two parties who've just been on the campaign trail taking lumps out of each other are going to work together. And of course, at the famous Rose Garden press conference, there was a joke made about that. Yes. When, in fact, about a joke, David Cameron was asked, whether he regretted saying when he was asked on the campaign trail, what's your favourite joke? And he said Nick Clegg, and that was put to them in the Rose Garden. They laughed it off, but there was a serious sort of underpinning there, because politicians who are fighting each other in an election, there's no holds barred, and they really do sort of take lumps out of each other. So for them to come together after the election, people couldn't see that lasting, and it did. So I think we sometimes have to look at these things which look improbable. Frankly, everything is unprecedented until it happens.
Yeah, indeed. But could it happen with the Tories and Conservatives? I mean, it's just an utterly preposterous idea, I suppose. But there's no reason it can't. And as we were just saying, you've got to go back to the 1930s to see the last time that happened.
Between the Conservatives and Labour,
yeah.
Yes. I think that, what you saw in, as Peter was saying there, in 1931, you had effectively a split in the Labour Party. Ramsay MacDonald led the National Labour Party. It turned out really to be basically him and a couple of friends who were left over. The rest of the Labour Party went off into opposition. And what happened after that, I think, is instructive, because we focus a lot on the last time that there was a changeover in the two main parties, when the Labour Party overtook the Liberals in the 1920s. It can happen in our system for that to happen. But what's interesting, I think, about 1931 there was that the Labour Party at the election after that, they collapsed. They collapsed from sort of 200 and whatever it was seats down to just 52. They looked as if they were finished. And at the next election in 1935, they started to come back. They were back into three figures, and they became the official opposition again, and they came back. But I think that we're not used to, in recent politics, these huge swings between the parties. And as Peter was alluding to in your last interview there, these rather small shares of the vote are being rewarded under our current system by huge majorities. And for Labour to have won this massive landslide on just over 30% of the vote, that's basically where Reform are now. It's perfectly credible if the opposition are divided, as they will be, between the Conservatives, Labour, Liberal Democrats, all the other parties. If Reform are sort of cleaning up as the largest sort of block of voters, they will be rewarded under first past the post in the same way as Labour have just been. And I think that really the signs are all there that is happening in the opinion polls, but also in actual votes in the local elections. And I really don't think that the commentariat and the sort of the political classes have really woken up to the fact that we have already seen this shift in voter 100%. Identification.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's something which I think they will only catch up with when it finally happens at an election. What they do about it at that point, as you say, whether they'll come together as a sort of grand coalition sounds improbable. But if they're down to those sort of double figures each, maybe it's something they'll look at.
We will see. Nigel, great to have you on, sir. Thank you. Nigel Fletcher, political historian, King's College London. Thank you to him. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. Can you see any of that happening? What would it take? What do the other parties need to do? Do we need to simply recalibrate our entire political system to make it more reflective of cross-party views? I can't see it happening. Reform are loving every bit of this as well. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
they're not just a family, they're an institution. And I love the monarchy. I believe in the monarchy from afar, from a foreign country that fought a war not to have it. And they can't, it's not just about a family, it's about protecting the future of the monarchy and the institution for not only Prince William, but Prince George. King Charles knows that he's jeopardizing that with any sort of meeting with Prince Harry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 5 to 2. Let's get a voice note from Karen.
Would I vote for Conservatives and Labour coalition? Absolutely not. Not in a cat's chance. Not if it was worth going to hell over. No, I wouldn't. Reform for me all the way. They've had it. Conservatives and Labour have had it.
It might feel like hell, though, Karen. Thank you very much indeed for that. Jerry is in Newcastle on this very point. Jerry, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian. It's great to talk to you for the first time, and
nice.
A brilliant show.
Nice to have you with us. Thank you.
Hey, I'm just thinking about this stupid, ridiculous woke idea from Kemi Badenoch. What an idiot she is. Absolute ridiculous. I mean, it just it's symptomatic of everything in life now. It's like you watch MasterChef, you help your competitors. You watch the Great British Bake Off, everyone helps each other. It's stopped becoming a competition where the real true values win through. Everybody shouldn't help each other. The best values should win through. Stop this Great British Bake Off idea that everyone should help each other. It's ridiculous.
What if the party in power, I mean, at the moment we've got a party in power, Jerry, that's a bit clueless on stuff, and they're struggling despite that, sort of landslide. Are they, or some would say, they're kind of in a bit of a pincer movement here? They're going to have to ask for help.
No, they should just call a general election.
Well, that would be nice.
They should just admit that they're a bunch of muppets.
Yeah, I'd love to see that Starmer announcement.
Let's just have Ben Habib and Advance UK through, please.
Is that where your vote would go?
It is, and shame on talkTV for not letting them on and penalising them.
Penalising them? We've had Ben and we had Rupert on last week. He was on the week before.
No, you've stopped having Ben Habib on. You have deliberately
we really haven't
having Ben Habib on.
We really haven't.
I think you find your heart. When was the last time you had Ben Habib on?
Probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe. I can't remember. But there's no. I can promise you, sitting here now, there's no. Absolutely.
There is.
No, 1st of August, Ben was on with us.
No, there's a direct agenda against Advance UK, especially because of Tommy Robinson.
There really isn't.
TV.
There really isn't. And he would have been on other programmes since he's been on with me. And I promise you, sitting here, looking at a load of producers who are just checking this out for us in terms of the dates.
No, Ben Habib has not been on mainstream TV, and I class TV as mainstream TV now.
I can't speak for wherever else he's been.
No, he hasn't been on Talk. He hasn't been on GB News. He hasn't been on any mainstream TV.
Well, I can't speak for anyone else. All I know is he was on with us about a month ago. And that would be around about the kind of amount of time we would have him on every few weeks. That would be normal, and he'll be on again. So I promise you, there's definitely no conspiracy there. Jerry, thank you. And I appreciate that if you are a supporter of a certain colour or a certain group or an individual, you want to hear them more. I understand that. But there's absolutely no 100%. What Jerry just said, I've never heard that theory before until he said it, and I'm happy to report that Ben was on with us a month back. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. More from you on the way. Let's get the news headlines now at 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. Kemi Badenoch challenging Keir Starmer. Is this common sense? Challenging Keir Starmer to work together, work with the Tories. We're nice people, Mr. Starmer, particularly on a plan to cut the welfare bill. Could this be the beginning of a Tory-Labour coalition? It's unlikely, but it's interesting gnawing our way around the various facets and offshoots of that proposition. Would you support it even? We'll have more from you on that shortly. Also this afternoon, British workers are taking the highest number of sick days in more than 15 years, averaging almost 2 full working weeks over the past 12 months. That's up from just over a week before the pandemic. What is going on? Why are we getting so sick? And phone theft in the UK has soared, with around 230 devices stolen every single day. These are mostly down in the capital, in London, by e-bike gangs who pass through criminal networks and export many to China and Algeria for resale or parts. And some of those phones will be gone overseas within hours of being nabbed out of your pocket. We'll have more on that as well. 0344 499 1000. This comes in from Martin in Whitley Bay. With such overtly forceful opposition coming from reform, it's not beyond the realms of imagination that the Uni Party will be fully revealed by the next general election. That's Tories, Labour and Lib Dems uniting to prevent reform from governing. Happens in Europe under the PR system, but thank God we have first past the post. Reform need to ensure a massive majority to stop the uni-party sabotage, the likes of which we saw after Brexit, says Martin. It's a really good point. It's only now we're talking about it in a bit of depth here that you think, actually, I mean, the threat of reform, it's not just a threat. Originally, this whole reform story started out as a threat to the Conservatives, right? And very quickly, almost instantly, became a massive threat to Labour as well. And all predictions show that reform will win. Now, there are different polls. Some say they might only just win, not enough to form a government. That's possible, or with a very slim majority. But win they will. Based on current polling, if there was an election tomorrow, Nigel Farage would be the Prime Minister. So how do you offset that? Well, as Martin says, do all three get into bed together? Chuck the Lib Dems into the pot too. It's not going to be dull come 2029, I can tell you that much. This story as well, which I just mentioned in the intro, there's sick days at the highest level for 15 years. Brits are taking off almost two full weeks a year from work. The rise is blamed on an ageing workforce, long-term health conditions and mental health, now the main cause of long absences. Lord Stuart Rose warns that Britain is at the edge of a crisis, with stress causing 41% of absences and 1 in 4 of working age living with a life-limiting disability. We have a problem on our hands. Let's speak first to Rachel Suff, Senior Wellbeing Advisor to the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development, who did the study. Good afternoon to you, Rachel. Nice to have you with us. I mean, whenever we read these stories, they're disturbing. I mean, even if we understand the reasons, nonetheless, this shows a real problem that is likely, based on everything that's happening, to get worse.
It is a real problem. It's such a big increase since before the pandemic, but the rise in sickness, absences, gone alongside a rise in the number of people with a long-term health condition. So there is a corresponding link there, and we're living and working longer and much more likely to develop a disability or a health condition when we are working longer. So there are reasons for the rise, but it's really important that employers get a grip on the issue.
Yeah. One of the issues, of course, that always comes up is the sort of controversy around the word anxiety. And, of course, we all get a bit of anxiety, and those that suffer from it on a very regular basis, this can be debilitating beyond belief. You know, it can move into all sorts of other really tricky, difficult situations. I think we all understand that. But there is also another sense, and I'm sure you're ahead of me on this one, Rachel, that where people think, well, hang on, you know, we all get a bit of anxiety. Waking up in the morning and feeling a bit rubbish is sort of part of life, really. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on, paying the bills, and, you know, I don't know, you could just be feeling bad. Not a reason 20 years ago to take a day off work, but perhaps today it would be a reason to take a day off work. How do we ever get to the truth of that really difficult area? Because that's absolutely where many people point the finger, as I'm sure you know.
Well, I think it is important to try and unpick that a bit. And I think we are more willing to talk about mental health in society and in the workplace as well. I think that's good. I think that's progressive, because if organisations don't know what's wrong with people, then they can't put in place the right support. So I think that's positive. And also we know that work-related stress, so workloads that are really high, deadlines that are too demanding, all sorts of other factors in the workplace can cause stress, which isn't a medical condition, but can tip over into anxiety and so on. But also in terms of mental health, we've got to remember that our mental health takes place across a really wide spectrum. Yeah. And there are those with more significant diagnosed conditions, but also many of us who are under pressure from pressures outside of work, inside work, and employers can make a really big difference in terms of the support, understanding, and so on that they put in place, because they can help prevent problems from escalating.
True. And I think, I mean, for me, and I can, you know, this is just anecdotal, it's just my own story. If I wake up You know, you probably look at me, Rachel, and you think, first thing you probably think is, he's a good-looking fella. His life is probably doing all right, this bloke. But, you know, like anyone else, I wake up with a bit of, you know, anxiety every now and again. You know, the kids and God knows what else, you know, they're back to school, there's stuff going on. I find that if I'm feeling like that, going to work is actually the thing that makes me feel better. It puts a little bit of a skip in my step.
I think that's really important. And what it says to all of us, and what it should say to employers, is that if you provide good work, if there's good work, you want to go to work, you enjoy your work. And whilst most people work because they need to financially, actually we can get an awful lot more from work. It gives us meaning. It gives us social interaction,
100%.
purpose.
Which is why it's that kind of strange, you know, is my anxiety, you know, one's anxiety, is it a problem? Is it the start of a problem? Or am I just having that thing that you have all the time in life, a few wobbly days?
Well, all of our mental health fluctuates. You can feel very different one day to the next. Where it's tipping over into a more serious condition, that's where people need to get medical advice, where employers need to provide support. And it really will vary one person to the next. And you might need to go and get a diagnosis. It can be quite tricky to get a diagnosis. And I think that's why we're seeing absence levels at such a level too. I think partly it can take a while to get access to diagnosis and treatment, but also employers need to try and put in place support earlier, because it can make a really big difference if people get access to, say, counselling, but also for physical health conditions, physio, occupational health, but good management as well. As we said earlier, if you're managed well, you feel supported, your workload is manageable, these are all really important factors that can help prevent stress and from conditions like anxiety getting worse.
Listen, Rachel, thank you very much for shining some light onto those figures and what can be done about it as well. Really appreciate your time. Rachel Suff, Senior Wellbeing Advisor at the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development, who did the study on that. I do think that is the tricky area, isn't it? It's this anxiety thing. I mean, imagine this. I mean, July the 4th last year, the day after Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, I had to come to work. I mean, just think about how I'm almost welling up with I can feel the anxiety rising right now, thinking of what happened that day. I can't remember when I was on. Was I on in the morning? I think I might have been on at about 5 in the morning till something or other. I can't remember. We mashed it all up a bit that day. And I reckon if you can come into work when you've just found out Keir Starmer has become the Prime Minister, I think anyone can go into work, frankly. I won't be buying much of an anxiety argument after that. And not only did I have to come into work, I had to actually talk about Keir Starmer being the Prime Minister. Reem Ibrahim is with us, Head of Media for the Institute of Economic Affairs. Reem, good afternoon to you. Listen, I know your leg has almost got to be falling off for you to take a day off work, much like myself, and you also would have been busy on July the 5th last year. I think that's the litmus test of being able to battle a little bit of anxiety.
I'll tell you what, I mean, that did make me laugh. During the election period, I mean, overnight, I was on air from 1 a.m. till 6 a.m. Round the corner from where, at my office, they were having a party. So whilst everybody else was drinking and having a good time and sort of celebrating the downfall of the Conservatives, I was sat in the cold on College Green, shivering, while waiting for the sun to start rising, whilst we had to just say the same thing over and over and over again, because none of the results really came through until about 6 a.m. So it was not very fun, but I still went through with it, and actually that wasn't even paid work. So
yeah, that's always the thing. Well, I was kept going with the promise of bacon sandwiches, and what happens, and this is one of the problems in this job, is that whenever there's a sort of a special night, they always order in food. You know, like 50 pizzas will show up in the office, or a bucket of chicken, or bacon sarnies, and the only person that doesn't have an opportunity to sit and eat them is the person on air. You've got like a little ad break where you can have a nibble and away you go, and then you look at that, it's winking at you on the plate. You've got to wait another 20 minutes to have another bite, and then the ad break's finished. So the anxiety was peaking on that day, but I still worked. And we've talked about this before, Reem, about anxiety, this tricky area. No one's disputing someone who's got a mental health issue, and some of those problems are, you know, it's as debilitating as a physical issue for some people. But I do think we're caught up in failing still to recognise that some people are just having an off day.
I think we're on the brink of a crisis here. And I think part of the problem is that in 2022, there was the introduction of the sort of sick note, which meant that it didn't have to have a physical ink signature. It could be issued by other healthcare professionals other than doctors. And it became increasingly easier to not go to. Now, the problem is we are now in a country and we are now in a situation in which you are not expected to go to work if you're having an off day. And I think that that's a really, really huge problem. Your previous guest who conducted the study sort of emphasized the importance of employers ensuring that there are better working environments. I mean, I would sort of challenge that and say it's never been easier to work. You know, things are so much easier if you have a disability, whether that be a mental or a physical one. Things are so much easier. Employers cannot make things more inclusive, at least in comparison to now, than what it was 20 or 30 years ago. And yet this sharp rise has increased as a result of all sort of post-pandemic. So I really do think that there is something else going on here. Employers, I mean, I feel extraordinarily sorry for employers that are in these sectors. I mean, we're thinking about across the economy in which people are taking increasingly more and more amounts of time off, and anybody that takes more than 4 weeks off, it's more likely that it's as a result of mental illness than anything else. This is a huge, huge issue, and I think part of the problem is the culture. Part of the problem is, you know, when it comes to employment regulations, employers feel as though they have to ensure that they are doing what's best for that particular person. But it also means that employers have to bear the cost. So what does that mean? It means they can employ less people because the cost of employing somebody is so much higher when you have the risk of these people just taking time off work completely. And it also means that there is an increase in the number of people that are claiming things like personal independence payments. I mean, there was last year, we looked at the FOIs that were done by the Taxpayers Alliance, and they were saying, you know, 6 people last year claimed disability benefits for having acne. You know, this is not a situation in which the entirety of it is taken seriously. So look, mental health is very serious and absolutely should be taken seriously by employers. But things are easier now than they ever have been before. So something else is going on. And I think some people almost certainly need to have the expectation that if you're having an off day, you do just go to work.
Yeah, I think it is almost as simple as that. An off day does not mean you are mentally in trouble or you've got some, you're brewing for you know, some kind of nervous breakdown or something. You know, we need to educate kids that having off days and not feeling tickety-boo 100% of the time is a perfectly normal disposition for a functioning human being in the 21st century in the Western world. It just happens. And I wonder, Reem, I think taking a day off is not controversial. Once upon a time, it was. When I say controversial, it was something you just didn't do unless you really, really had to. And today, I don't think that kind of observation or experience of taking time off, I don't think it's a problem for people now, whereas once upon a time it would have been, not that long ago.
I think you're right, and the word I would use is shameless. There's sort of a bit of shamelessness when it comes to taking time off work. I mean, I remember when I was sort of 16, when I was first allowed to have my first job, and I was part-time during my A-levels, and I remember feeling so incredibly guilty. I was in hospital for pneumonia, and I felt really guilty that I wasn't in work, and my dad sort of said to me, no, this is sort of legitimate excuse. Yeah. But it's that kind of feeling isn't really felt, I think, and I will, you know, sort of shame my own generation here. Gen Z, it's extraordinarily difficult for a lot of them to go to work and actually feel as though it's the employer's fault. And I really think that we need to shift this narrative. You know, employers have made things easier. We are much more adaptable. Working from home is much more common now than it was before the pandemic. Things are easier. It's easier to go to work. It is easier to have a structure in your life. But I think, Ian, you sort of alluded to this point earlier. it is good for you to go to work. It is good to have a purpose. It is good to have a reason to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
It is good to have structure. If you are suffering from a severe mental health illness, then of course there are some aspects of that that mean you are unable to work. But if you have anxiety or depression and it is something that you can deal with on a daily basis, going to work is extremely important for you because it means you have a structure. You have a reason to get up in the morning. There's also the other aspect of this, Ian. How fair is it when we're in a situation in which millions of people across the country, many of them listening to this program now, go to work every single day, no matter what is going on at home, no matter what is going on in their personal lives, no matter what is going on outside of their work, and they get up every morning and they go to work. Those are the people that are really being taken for fools here, because we're in a situation in which millions of people are claiming long-term sickness benefits. We're now in a situation in which it is easier to take time off work. And quite frankly, it is those that are self-employed, those that are freelance, that end up losing out, whereas those that are in cushy office jobs end up being able to take huge amounts of sick pay at the employer's expense. And I think that we're in a situation that is really, really unfair. I basically think people need to learn to pull their socks up a little bit, but I think this is a cultural problem. Come on, guys. Like, if you are a bit anxious or you are feeling sad or there is something going on in your personal life, that is not a reason to take a sick day off.
There it is. Reem, thank you as ever. Always very thorough stuff from Reem Ibrahim, who's a head of media at the Institute of Economic Affairs. And I know... And it is tricky because we didn't talk about the mental health stuff before. Years ago, no one, even the phrase really, I've got to think of my mental health. Nobody said that. And there doubtless were people suffering in silence. And we all understand that. And it must be awful for people who are in a real debilitating cul-de-sac of doom almost. Where I don't know where to go, I don't know which way to look, I don't sleep, I can't eat, it's terrible. We all get that. I think we all understand that. And thank God we live in a world where people can talk about that without there being a taboo. But no one can ever convince me that we're simultaneously not in a world also where you have some people, maybe it is a Gen Z thing predominantly, I don't know, who will see feeling a bit rubbish as a reason to not go to work. That's the bit and no one will ever be able to pinpoint that, because you go to a doctor, you say, I'm anxious, I feel, I've got a load of anxiety. I wake up in the morning and life's a bit weird. It's like, well, you're 22, it's meant to be a little bit weird, and, I haven't got loads of money. Yeah, again, you're 22. That might come later. So there's all of that, and I just think we've transposed ordinary living into a kind of, or the bumps and the hurdles of ordinary living. We've almost pathologized it, and it's become an illness. It's not an illness, it's just living, and some days are not as good as others. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
front room window. We all remember that she went around dressed up as the EU flag because she was so depressed that the working classes of this country dare to vote to leave the European Union. She looks down her nose at ordinary people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 2. This comes in from no name given, actually, who says there is a reference sick note crisis. There's a huge disconnect between a person's GP who issues the fit note and workplace management. There is no communication permitted if it is a work management issue. It can often be down to the lack of management experience and skills, competency of managers. This point is rarely addressed, but it can also come down to a person's ability to do the job and how performance is managed. That's very true. But you also get into that issue, don't you, of somebody who just doesn't like their job. It's a bit like, it reminds me of the migration issue. Not liking the country you live in is not a good reason to claim asylum in somebody else's country. That doesn't work. It's not meant to be a supermarket of choice. You don't look around and go, oh, in fact, I don't like it, therefore there's an injustice. And similarly, if you don't necessarily like your job very much, I know it could do your head in if you're getting bullied or something like that. That's terrible. But if you just don't like it very much, that's not a reason to claim that you have an anxiety crisis and therefore you can't go into work. Back to the bigger issue of coalitions. This is Mark in Lincolnshire. Mark, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us.
Indeed, yes. We spoke Sunday, I think.
We did on Sunday, yeah.
Shabana Mahmood is on, I believe.
That's the one.
Yeah, well, spare thought for me, because after this phone call, I've got to go and pick up some cat poo, so that's lovely.
Nice.
Yeah, well, you see, your day's much brighter now, you see.
Yeah, well, I walked the dog for this morning and kind of did the same thing, so while we're on the subject.
In life grand. Yeah, the coalition thing, realistically, I don't think that's ever going to really happen. I think, however, I did kind of rate it. Was it Finn I spoke to when I rang up?
Yeah, sorry about that.
As I mentioned, I kind of still give it maybe a 25% chance. However, I think what will happen is, if it's ever going to happen, it'll be done for the following reason. And that is probably about a year out before the election. Simon's going to know when he's going to call it. He'll have an idea. He'll start talking to the Tories, and they'll come up with something.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I think they would do so, and I don't know why, because I don't think Reform are actually an actual real threat, but if they did form a coalition, they'd probably join in with the Lib Dems as well, and it would be to block Reform. That would be the central reason for it, just like...
that'd be kind of the only reason, wouldn't it, really? It's the only thing they could do.
That's the only thing I can see, just like they did in Germany, like they kind of done in France, to stop the party that they fear the most. Quite why they'd want to do this, I don't know. Because as soon as Farage hits any hurdles, he'll just fold like a deck of cards.
Yeah.
Because I don't genuinely believe, that he has belief in what he spouts out, the deportation stuff, that kind of thing.
You don't think so?
No, I don't.
You said this before. You don't think that he... You think he believes it but just can't do it, or he doesn't really believe it?
I just don't think he really believes it. I think the impression I was getting, you see this particularly with the conference there at the weekend, it's more like the show, popularity. I think that's what really Nigel's all about, and that's quite sad, really, because he was serious at one point in his career.
I was with Nigel Farage yesterday, strangely enough. I know we were at a funeral, but we're also in a pub, and of course a pub is his favourite place. And I've never seen him look more confident and happy than I saw him yesterday.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying he doesn't want to win the election, Ian. I believe he does want to win it. But I think, if I'm honest, I think the reason he wants to win it is so that when he's won it, he can go, look at what I did. They said I couldn't do it, but I've done it. That's exactly...
So you're quite sceptical about his kind of overarching motivations. So do you think then, Tories, Labour, Lib Dems, if they did, and I know this is probably a ridiculous proposition, but if they all clubbed together and form one big party, would that be a good thing? Would it be a better party than Reform are in terms of what they're offering?
No. Purely for the fact that they'd just never be able to do anything, would they?
No, because you're not going to get the Lib Dems on board with deporting 600,000 people, are
exactly. Precisely.
Or most of Labour, for that matter.
I think, like I say, I think that the reason would be, they create this super coalition. They stop, they essentially block Reform taking office. Probably within a year, 2 maximum, they dissolve that and they hold another election. They just wait to see what happens after that. After the initial election, they would kind of hope, I guess, that Reform would fall away. They'd just break apart.
Yeah.
And then they would just hold another election. Then they can just go back to the status quo.
We will see. Listen, Mark, great to speak again. Thank you, Mark, in Lincolnshire. On the coalition, on the anxiety, mental health thing, Sam says, over the last 6 years, I've been under tremendous amount of mental stress due to having life hits one after the other with little time in between to adjust, recovery, adapt, etc. Home stress too, and you're absolutely right. Going to work helps. In fact, it was my respite. You know why? Because it was the only thing that was normal and gave me an escape. It's been the best antidepressant. My wife suffers from anxiety and depression, and while she had time off when her mum had died, she decided to work for herself and now gets decent pay as well as private health care. And she says she feels worse when she has a day off, when she's at home on her own. I know, that's brilliant to hear that, Sam, thank you. And I know it doesn't work absolutely for everyone, because some people going into work, they just can't face it. Probably depends on what you do for a living. But certainly when I come in here to work, and this is clearly not the only place on planet Earth where people enjoy their job, it is mostly full of really nice people. I mean, even on a good day, you'll get a smile out of Amy. I know it's a kind of rarity, but so it puts a little spring in your step and you think, yeah, do you know what? Whatever else is going on, there are really good people around, and it's nice to have a bit of a chat and a natter and a giggle, and we do all of that, and the subjects we end up going through before we start work are extraordinary, probably dozens and dozens without even realising it. And again, doesn't work for everybody, but going to work, and Sam is nice evidence of that as well. Thank you. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. This is Talk 25 to 3. Let's talk about this subject. This comes up quite a bit, but there's just some interesting new research on this. Phone theft in the UK surging again. 230 handsets stolen every single day, and 3/4 of them in London. This is a Sun investigation that found that criminals on e-bikes are behind many of the quick snatches, moving very swiftly. The stolen devices are taken, of course, elsewhere, probably in another country by the next day. Who knows? China, Algeria are classic areas where your phone could end up. Or stripped for parts, whatever the case may be. Tom Bryden, feature writer at The Sun, is back on with us. Good afternoon to you, Tom. We spoke like a week ago. We were talking about people who put ice in beer.
We have. Much more serious topic now.
Much more serious and very disturbing. Having your phone nicked is a right pain in the backside for lots of reasons. Firstly, that thing there costs over £1,000. So whether you pay it outright or buy it by instalments, it still costs over £1,000. And of course, your life is on it.
Indeed. I think it's actually the latter. That's the bigger problem.
I think so.
You know, people have insurance these days. You can get a new SIM card, but it's all your passwords. Everything you try logging on your computer, what happens, it sends a message to your phone with the thing in. And of course, a lot of that's very sensitive personal data, which these thieves now potentially have access to and might even try to extort you.
It's interesting how quick these things happen as well. I mean, lots of people have had their phone nabbed. I know, I actually haven't, you know, I know, God, please, now I've said it. You've had yours nabbed. I've got so many mates who've had theirs. One was literally the e-bike thing, just a guy, somebody on the street holding their phone, looking at Google Maps, just trying to work out where the next meeting was, normal stuff, and bam, it had gone, you know. And of course, we all said to him afterwards, mate, you stood on the side of a curb, like literally like where you would hail a cab, with your phone like that, and someone on a bike just went.
Tell you what, I think it is one of those things where when it happens to you once, you're suddenly so more vigilant than you were before. But before then, especially, you know, if you don't necessarily live in London where it is, you know, particularly epidemic, you just walk around with your phone out normally. Do the same thing here. It looks fine, but these things happen so quick.
Do you know, look, because I just don't get my phone out walking down the street.
Yeah.
I just don't do it.
Yeah.
But having said that, there's always a quick moment, isn't there? Like somebody might call, or did I get a text? And you look. So, and it could be in that moment that it happens. I've noticed a few people, and when I first saw it, I checked it out on Amazon, are now putting these little toggles through their case.
You
can attach it to your belt or whatever. So,
I think it's sensible. Some people might say, "You look."
Are you toggled up?
I'm not.
You're not toggled.
Maybe I should be.
No one here's to Amy. Are you toggled? No. Adam's not. Finn. He doesn't know whether he's Arthur or Martha or what day of the week it is. So no, he's not toggled.
I think it's sensible.
It is sensible.
I should do it. I think people say, oh, it looks silly, or what are you worried about? But in that one moment where someone might try, take your phone, but then they can't, you'd feel so vindicated.
Finn had his phone nicked in Thailand.
Oh, really?
Oh, it was the classic. You know, if you go into, shall we call it, one of those clubs in Thailand, and of course that's you know precisely what happened. He thought he was talking to Bertha. Turns out he was talking to Barry. But and you know before he knew it. Bingo, his phone.
Well, that's an absolute nightmare on the other side of the world. It's hard enough getting it nicked in London, where you can go into any cafe, get Wi-Fi with your laptop.
But exactly.
Other side of the world.
But this is, so we are talking predominantly the e-bike snatches with these kind of numbers. I mean, 230 a day. Some would say, well, over the whole country, is that a lot? I'd say that's a lot. And of course, you know, in some areas, and these are the ones we know about, of course, because there could well be others out there. People don't report it anymore because they think, well, you know, or they're not insured. And even if you are insured, it's not always a straight case of getting the money back either.
I think so long as your insurance is, you know, decent enough, you provide a crime reference number, you should get it back. But it is mostly, like you say, these e-bike snatches. I think that's why it's become such a big topic of conversation recently. So back in the day, you'd have people doing it on maybe stolen mopeds, but they're noisy, really easy to track as well, and they can't quite go as fast, whereas these e-bikes go up to 50 miles an hour on London streets. weave through the traffic, go down a one-way street, and before you know it, impossible to track.
I mean, it's literally easier to chase a car in London than it would be one of those bikes. Because a car's going to get stuck in traffic and it can't go far. But like you say, one of those bikes, and the kind of characters that do this know exactly the route they're on. They know where to go. They know, once they're up an alley, even if there's a cop chasing them, they're gone.
Exactly, yeah. So it is really pre-planned. The cop I was speaking to about it was saying this is a well-oiled machine. They've got their classic routes in the capital, Oxford Street, the West End. You have a lot of tourists there who don't know any different. And then they'll have a pre-planned route out, sort of could be miles away, but it'll only take them a few minutes. They'll have someone it hands off to, and then they've already got a buyer set up for a set number of phones. So those people doing the nicking really are just the bottom level of the rung.
Yeah, they're like small-time drug dealers, aren't they? In that sense, there's bigger tiers above them, and it happens very quick. And I suppose if you are some kind of dodge pot that runs around on one of these bikes doing this, and you're getting 30 quid a phone or whatever it is, then do 10 of those a day, you're doing all right.
Well, it's actually a lot more than 30 quid. It's, I'd say, between 100 and 200.
Wow.
Per phone. Of course, these are phones which have cost you and I up, north of £1,000 sometimes.
Correct,
but, 5 of those for a day,
it's not a bad day's work.
Not at all.
And then you just go to the pub and spend your ill-gotten gains. And of course, the turnaround is quite quick, because these things can be much like people who nick cars. They can be in a crate in another country in 24 hours.
Absolutely. And again, that's because these people doing the nicking are just handing it off to people who buy from other thieves, bundle them together in boxes. So they've already got those sort of supply chains, those export chains.
There's a whole system there as well. So you haven't got to, if you're the person that nicks the phone, you haven't got to know some higher command person. You might just know a fella thief who does know the high, and they'll sort it out for you.
Exactly, yeah. So often people see, on the tracking apps, Find My iPhone, it might go from North London, South London, one side of the city to the other, before finally ending up, say, near Heathrow Airport, in a warehouse.
And then Algeria.
Algeria, 28% of the time, which I was surprised by. I didn't know it had such a thriving second-hand phone market.
Indeed.
But it does.
It does.
It does.
Where was the top country?
Algeria.
Oh,
but
Algeria was at the top,
yes, yeah.
So we got China in there as well?
Yeah, China, 20%, 7% Hong Kong, and many of those in Hong Kong going to China just after, because again, it's where they make the iPhones. Yeah, so everyone there knows how to take them apart again.
And I guess it's either they're kind of cleaned up. Obviously, they're completely what's the word? Wiped. So everything goes from it. They're cleaned up, resold, or the parts from them are reused.
So it is often the parts, because the thing with iPhones is, iPhones in particular, because they are the most valuable ones. If you don't have the passcode, you can't get in to reset it to factory settings.
Yeah.
Sometimes some software can do it. However, in many cases, it is just a case of stripping it down for parts. Screen, battery, particularly valuable. Loads of precious metals in there as well. And there's a huge demand, because, you don't have Apple stores all over China. So if something breaks, you've got a quick, very tech-savvy person who can fix it. You just need the part.
So there's a whole other industry there. So it's interesting, isn't it? This is kind of, this is organised crime. This is, fully organised crime in different ways and different tiers. And, that one snatch of your phone is assisting to service sort of multifarious elements of the criminal world, whether it's in reselling, packaging up as a load of them together, or ending up in China where there's probably a factory that looks like any other factory that strips them and
absolutely.
Flogs it
yeah.
away.
In fact, there's a massive, world's largest electronics market is in Shenzhen, which is this city in southern China where they make iPhones. There's almost 40 other iPhone part supplies there.
Wow.
And it is organised crime, but it's sort of disorganised organised crime. There's not one overarching criminal gang controlling this worldwide, but you've got, right down to those small minnow sort of street thieves, up to people exporting it. There's different people in China importing phones. They'll know they're stolen because they'll see on the home screen sort of some family who clearly isn't trying to sell their phone.
Exactly that. I'll just tell you very briefly a kind of a more positive story of an iPhone and possession of one. A mate of mine ordered his iPhone, and the next day a package arrived, and when he opened it up, there was 8 iPhones in the box.
Good news.
And he thought, happy days. Are they going to realise they've sent me 8 iPhones? Yes, they did. within a day, because he thought, he thought, well, I'll hang on
shame,
to, he wasn't going to sell them or anything. He thought, I'll hang on for a couple of weeks, see if anything happens, and if nothing happens, I'm literally sitting here with about £10,000 worth of kit.
And they asked for it back the next day?
They asked for it back. They knew it was an error straight away.
Oh, well, one night of
Indeed. But the message here is, I mean, don't get your phone out in public, really. I mean, just don't do it.
I think it's not worth... Well, you can do it, just look over your shoulder, be vigilant, because it takes the smallest thing just to check.
If you did one of those toggle things that people talk about, there's two problems with that. Firstly, I've got an image to protect, Tom, as you know, and me standing on the street with a big old belt with a thing might look a bit weird. So there's that. The other thing, if somebody does nab the phone and it's attached to your belt, they could take you down the road with them, couldn't they?
Hypothetically, I like to think that would make enough distraction that they'd quickly realise
they'd let go of
it's not worth it. Yeah,
I think you're right. Tom, great to see you again. Thank you.
You too.
Tom
Cheers,
Brighton
Ian.
with us from The Sun, writing up that piece. Check it out in the newspaper. Check it out online. It's a big story about the amount of thefts we have of phones in this country. All the details are there. It's 2:45. Some breaking news just in the last 5 or 10 minutes. The Israeli military has said it has targeted the leadership of Hamas with strikes on Qatar's capital, Doha. Several explosions have been heard in the city. This is a big story and part of a moving story, of course, that's gone on forever. But this is a huge divergence in terms of Israel's intent and where they are bombing. Several explosions heard over the city. Israel media is reporting that US President Donald Trump gave his approval for the attack, and naturally that's a story that we'll have more details on throughout the course of the day. We'll bring it to you here first on Talk. Lots still to come. 0344 499 1000. We're talking about sick days, why people are off. Is it people who can't be bothered to go to work? And that question we threw out at the beginning, would you vote Labour and Conservative if it was a coalition? It sounds like a crazy idea, but Kemi Badenoch is asking Labour to work together on things like welfare reform. But with Reform UK chomping at the heels of both major parties, will Labour and the Tories be left with no choice come the general election? Details on that as well. Your comments along the way. You can leave a voice note on the same number, 0344 499 1000, and you can message 87222. We'll go to your calls next on Talk.
Well, Ed Miliband being branded an eco-hypocrite this morning in The Sun as well, because, of course, the Energy Secretary boasted in February that he'd installed a heat pump at his house. Now, I don't know who paid for that, but I can bet your bottom dollar that it was probably us. But it turns out that he's also got another property in Doncaster, South Yorkshire, and it's got a gas boiler in it. And he hasn't replaced the gas boiler. And worse than that, not only has he not replaced the gas boiler, but he's charged us for the bill.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Kathy says, it's 10 to 3, by the way, voice of doom on the way. Kathy says, regarding mental health, you put it perfectly. I've tried to explain so many times to my grown-up son that it's completely normal to have days when you feel awful and days that you feel great, and he doesn't get it. I blame partly the fact that mental health is rammed down our throats so much. Sometimes the best tonic is to get up and get on with it, says Kathy in Gloucester. It's so true that I don't dispute people who are just having a bit of a wobbly day genuinely think that it's a mental health issue rather than what happens to human beings. And as Kathy rightly says there, we talk about, we're giving just day-to-day feeling a bit anxious. We're giving it the title of a mental health issue, which I know technically it is, but that's wrong, isn't it? Because that's not a mental health issue. A mental health, you should never call it a mental health issue. No more than you should call someone who's, I don't know, broken a toe, suggesting they have osteoporosis or whatever that thing's called. Is that the right one? Brittle bones and all the rest of it? You know what I mean? We shouldn't overplay what it is. Sarah says, cushy office job. What's that? I have a cushy office job and I was sick 2 days last week, my second and third sick day since starting work there 2.5 years ago. These 2 days will be deducted from my salary. I wouldn't mind, but one of those cushy office jobs, to be honest, says Sarah. Are they not allowed to? You're not allowed to have a sick day. I guess it depends where you work. Just before we talk to Lenny, Voice of Doom, day three of the Voice. So it's fairly new. We think this one is utterly impossible. I know I say it all the time. I think the last one that went on for 21 days was only really one because we started giving clues. But they weren't that generous, the clues, but nonetheless. So have a listen to this voice. It's a mystery voice of a political nature. Who is this?
Every area of the country.
If you think you know, 87222, here it is again.
Every area of the country.
Don't phone, just message 87222. Here it is again.
Every area of the country.
And of course, as per usual, if we get a correct answer, we'll tell you on the other side of the news at 3. If we don't, it rolls over to tomorrow. Who is this?
Every area of the country.
87222. Remember, we're looking for politicians here. Let's go to Lenny down in good old Ashford. How you doing, Lenny?
I'm tickety-boo, thank you, Ian, mate.
Good. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear. All good at this end. Yeah, what have you got for us?
Well, there's two things. I mean, I was just listening to regarding sick pay. And I only had 12 employees work for me, and I paid a little bit over the going rate, but I paid no sick pay, and I never had a problem.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Did you?
It was approved.
Were you ever? Yeah. Were you obliged to pay? How does that work now? I'm sure now is very different, but do you have to give sick pay? Does it depend on the kind of contract that the employee is on?
Well, we had our contract drawn up by a solicitor at the time.
Yeah.
My business closed down 15 years ago. But
what business were you in, Lenny?
Pardon?
What business were you in?
I was the largest van dealer in Kent.
Were you really?
Yes. If you know where Travis Perkins are in Ashford?
Yes.
Well, that was one of my sites.
Was it really?
Yes.
I thought they used to be down Victoria Crescent.
Well, they did, but they moved on to when I closed.
So it means nothing to anybody else.
No, they moved on to my site. Yeah. And how I started my business was quite a story. If I tell you, you'll be surprised.
Go on, give us a brief version, just for time, Lenny.
Okay. Well, I needed a van, and I couldn't find one, so I went to an auction to buy a van. They were so cheap, I bought 6 and became a van dealer.
Brilliant. I love that. I love that. That's great. And then your vans just increased in numbers.
The largest van dealer in Kent.
You're the original man with a van?
Yes, I was.
Fantastic. I love that. So anyway, how do we begin talking about sick pay, wasn't it? So you managed to sort of pay a bit more, and that was an incentive for people not to take time off?
Yeah, I used to give them a little. I used to pay over the going rate and no sick pay at all.
Wow.
And we never had a problem.
Stunning. That is brilliant. Lenny, I love it. Thank you very much indeed. Love the van story as well. Lenny in Ashford. This comes from Ash in Apsley, who says, Ian, 53, never had a day off since leaving school at 16. I love that. It sounds like my dad. He was, I don't mean Ash specifically. I don't think my dad ever, until he got ill, I don't think he ever had a day off. I run 2 businesses, says Ash, and all my staff are loyal and only take time off if absolutely no other choice. I respect my family and staff, and that pays dividends. Also, drove to work with a broken nose and a collarbone once in the snow after playing rugby the previous weekend. Youth of today are too soft. That's not their fault, it's the system. Love that. Ash, thank you very much indeed. Linda is in New South Wales, in Australia. Linda, how are you doing?
Hello. G'day, mate. How are you?
Good as gold at this end. How's life down there as you come into what I suppose is going to be a sort of a summer?
It was 27 degrees yesterday.
Get out of here. Like we need that.
And it's spring.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
okay.
My next door neighbour was in Sydney a few weeks ago, and apparently it was torrential rain for a couple of weeks. So, of course, you know.
No, we're going to get slammed next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something else coming on. We're going to get slammed. So
never mind. Well, buy an umbrella. You shouldn't have to say that to an Australian, but you might have to. What have you got for us, Linda?
All right, I've got 2 things, if I may. First one is, all right, I'm going to go for your immigration policy.
Okay.
So we don't need to go that every other day. But 10 years ago, I mean, I know Tony Abbott takes credit for it, but it was John Howard.
Yep.
That we did a degree with Nauru, which is an island off the north coast of Australia. And if you came over, the Navy picked you up and they shoved you over there. And if you made it to the coast, well, first thing, we'd burn your boat. B, if you didn't get eaten by crocodiles, or B, didn't die from starvation, because it's really rough up there, that England needs to do the Rwanda or...
We had, I'll tell you what, Linda, we had, you may remember Alexander Downer, who was your foreign minister for a while back in the day.
The big, we call him the panda.
I bet he loves that.
No, we did. We called him the panda. He was our ambassador, and he was called the panda.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, we had him on the show a little while back, and he explained the Aussie system really well. And what was most attractive about it is that even if it turned out you were a legit person seeking asylum, you still never made it to Australia, right? You went to another country that was appointed and had a deal with the Australian government. Listen, I love it. Linda, I've got to move for time. Lovely to hear from you. I know it's midnight down there in New South Wales in Australia. Thank you to Linda. Do call us again. Voice of Doom, will we get a winner? Find out in a couple of moments. Remember, we're trying to identify the voice of a politician. Who is this?
Every area of the country.
87222 if you think you know. Message here from Paul in Weymouth, who says, is there a difference between the average number of sick days in the public and private sectors? I would suggest there is, and I know which one will be the smaller figure. I think you're bang on as well on that, Paul. Brad in Cambridge, I've seen cooperation between, this is reference coalitions. I've seen cooperation between different parties work very well in Denmark, but they don't really have moon-howling lunatic activists like our Labour Party does. Of course, it couldn't work here. Yeah, I sense that's the trouble. Can you imagine some daft old lefty getting into bed with anything that was called a Conservative? It'd be like doing a deal literally with the devil. All of that to come. Voice of Doom answer, if we have one, on the other side of the news at 3 o'clock, which is coming next on...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Welcome back to the home of common sense. Loads going on here. We're talking about this, it's not even a possibility of a coalition. Kemi Badenoch has challenged Keir Starmer to work with the Conservatives on a specific area. This is a plan to cut welfare reform. And of course, the Labour government will never agree to that, but it makes her look like, well, I tried, and it makes him look like he couldn't be bothered. Nonetheless, could this be the beginning of a kind of more coalition-type system in this country? Could we even have a Labour-Conservative coalition come the next election? And if so, would you vote for them? We'll have more calls and comments on that. Also this afternoon, all of England's worst-performing hospitals have now been named and shamed in a damning government analysis showing 80% of them are failing on performance targets like waiting lists, or they're in financial ruin, running financial deficits. This is a grim assessment of what it's like out there. I know Wes Streeting said we can't do things overnight, but you've been in there, you know, a year and 2 months, nearly a year and 3 months. Time for progress, we think. And BBC boss Tim Davie can't guarantee the corporation won't be hit by another and more toxic scandals, telling MPs that no one is irreplaceable, as he was grilled over a wide range of issues that have plagued the BBC, like that Gaza documentary, the Glastonbury coverage, and the recent probe into Greg Wallace's behaviour. We'll have more on that story shortly. 0344 499 1000. David says, sick note Britain. They're just layabouts. Sack 'em all. Don't give any benefits. Job done, says David, who would run things in a very more efficient manner, I sense. This one in from Tim says, before I retired, I was a freelance TV director. The only reasonable excuse for a sick day was to be in intensive care. One day I was so ill I couldn't actually speak, but I went to work and completed the day with hand signals and grunts. I've worked with a few TV directors like that. Sure it was the same Tim. But I went to work and completed the day. Not once did anyone from production or HR come to the set to see if I was okay. They just saw that the job was being completed, so everything must be tickety-boo. Perfectly normal behaviour in television. Yeah, I make you right there, Tim. Thank you very much indeed for that. And Don says, when I was in the public sector, staff had 6 months full pay off sick, most miraculously recovered just as the sick pay ran out. Yeah, I can only imagine that being the case as well. Before we continue, the voice of doom. Oh, let me just remind you, by the way, of that breaking news, which I'm sure is going to probably gain more momentum throughout the course of the day. We'll get more details as we get it, but the Israeli military has said it's targeted the leadership of Hamas with strikes on Qatar's capital, Doha. Several explosions were heard in the city. We understand Israeli media are reporting that the US President Donald Trump gave his approval for the attack. Now, before we go any further, voice of doom. Yes, that voice of that pesky voice. It's only day 3. It's a fairly new voice. The question, who is this?
Every area of the country.
Who's that? Any ideas? These are some of the guesses. Greg Clark, no. Andrea Leadsom, no. Laura Moffat, Margaret Beckett, Jane Stevenson, Natalie Bennett, Penny Mordaunt. None of those. It's interesting that we had a lot of guesses of female voices as well, male voices as well as female voices. It was a female, and we got a right answer. Paul from Worcester and Kit in Bath both correctly identified that it was Ruth Kelly of the Blair-Brown years. I think her last job under Gordon Brown was Secretary of State for Transport. She previously, though, was a minister in Tony Blair's government, also local communities. She was Secretary of State under Blair as well. And then she kind of quit politics. Ruth Kelly. Remember her? She was a slightly clumsy person, but when I say clumsy, sorry, clunky, awkward is what I mean. I'm sure she wasn't clumsy at all. And made, ministerial positions, but then I think she just decided to get out of it, as I remember. Go, I don't want to do this anymore. Ruth Kelly was the right answer, which means, contrary to what I thought, that this one was going to go on for weeks, possibly months, we'll have a brand new Voice of Doom tomorrow. Now, on to this story. England's worst-performing hospitals have been named and shamed in this damning report. 80% of trusts are failing, with Mid and South Essex the worst large hospital, Worcestershire Acute second, and Queen Elizabeth, King's Lynn and Countess of Chester hospitals the worst small trust. Bosses at failing hospitals now face the sack or pay cuts of up to £15,000 if they don't approve. You might think that would already be the case, wouldn't it? That if you fail at that level, there'd be a penalty. What seems to happen in these big kind of, this curious world of people who end up in these sort of big jobs where they're the head, whether you call them the CEO or whether they're the senior manager, whatever the title is, and they sort of spend their career working in, they might be working for British Gas for a few years and then they go on to run a hospital or something like that. And there only seems to be bonuses handed out, even when something is failing. That's just been the story of our system forever. Do we need to change that? Let's get a word from Dean Eggett, GP in Doncaster and CEO of Doncaster Local Medical Committee. Good afternoon to you, Dean. Always good to see you. Just on that last point, fining somebody or penalising them for not doing their job sounds fairly reasonable.
Yeah, I think it does. I'm very interested by this league table. It's the first time, I think, in a long time that we've seen in black and white the health disparities across England. So this is a complete picture of all of our hospitals from top to bottom, and it really is showing something extraordinarily telling. It's showing us who's failing and who's not failing, but in an interesting geographical representation. So we can see from this list, for example, that if you live in one area, you're likely to get world-class care, but if you live in another area, you're likely to really suffer from the services that you receive. So this may be damning not only to the hospitals and the hospital bosses, but I think this is a damning insight really for the NHS as a whole and our Department of Health and political leaders. This is something they really need to get a grip of.
100%. And I guess the wider issue here, because we used to have league tables, didn't we? And then they were sort of frowned upon a little bit and they disappeared. And now it looks like they're back. With all of that in mind, I mean, Wes Streeting said, as you'll be more aware than me on this specific point, Dean, but, he said, look, I can't do this overnight. I've got to change things. We are still seeing waiting list issues. We're still seeing trusts that are running a deficit, etc. I mean, is there, from your clinical perspective, are you seeing chinks of light? Is there positivity on the horizon? I mean, real ones rather than just a misplaced optimism.
I think you can tell from the faces that I'm pulling that I'm cynical about this. And I also like to be optimistic. I think there are ways that this can change. And I don't think that we are stuck. I don't think the NHS is done for, but I do think somebody has to take radical change as soon as possible rather than just talking about it. For example, let's come back to these league tables. If what we're doing is we're publishing them because we expect patients to choose the best one and essentially stop using the worst ones and say, look, there are great ones out there, just choose them instead, then this fail. This isn't going to work.
Sure.
These league tables need to be used is really for government. Government need to look and say, okay, who's failing and why? And again, if we look at the picture, we can see central London is absolutely fine. The further you move away from the centre of London, the worse your care will get. And we've talked for a long time that if you were to live in Kensington, for example, versus when you live in Blackpool, you're going to have a 10-year difference in your life expectancy. Yeah. We've been putting that down to smoking and alcohol and pollution and all these things, which of course it is. But we also now need to look at the black and white fact that your local services will also affect your health. Blackpool is way down the bottom. If you're outside of London, you are getting poor care. And that's not just about leaders, that's about resources, that's about support. So what is the government doing? What is Wes doing to help these hospitals that are struggling rather than just promoting brilliant care?
I mean, those hospitals still have beds in them, oxygen machines, machines that go ping at all the right times, or hopefully. They've got the kit. Is it... What does that look like, the sort of manifestation of inferior care? Is it because there's not enough staff, or per hour a patient isn't seen as often when in hospital? What would you say that looks like, Dean, in terms of how that happens in practice, inept care?
Definition of good care, really, I think all of us would say is that we need it quickly, we need it when we need it, and we need it free without barriers in place. And that's just in some areas. We know that there are waiting lists well over a year in some area, and when you do finally get there, they don't necessarily have the treatment available to you or the specialist available. So you're waiting, you're not getting the care that you actually need, and you're coming out the other end in worse health because of the wait without actually any decent treatment at all. Coming back to the league tables, what we can see right at the top of the tables is those smaller hospitals that use specialists that are close to London come out really at the top. And that's essentially, we can infer, because they don't have much to focus on. They're not worrying about massive populations. They're not worrying about diverse populations. They're worrying about small problems and small numbers. Whereas some of the hospitals down at the bottom of the list have extraordinarily diverse cultures over really large geographical areas, and they don't have the support to deal with that.
Yeah.
That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're a poorly performing hospital, doctors don't want to go there, nurses don't want to go there.
Sure.
People don't invest in it, and it just gets worse. So it's that cycle that we really need to break, and that's not a cycle that we doctors and nurses can deal with. That's something for government to tackle. So I lay this fairly at the feet of West Streeting and say, OK, you've made the league table. Now what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, that's the big question. Listen, Dean, always good to gauge your views on these things. Thank you for your time. We'll let you get back to it. He's a busy GP, Dean Eggett, GP in Doncaster, CEO of Doncaster's local medical committee. Let's speak with Matthew Hulbert, patient leader at Just Treatment. Matthew regularly helps us out on these kind of stories. Afternoon to you, Matthew. I mean, is it just a case of, are we in a sort of a holding bay? That's a sort of, I can imagine a politician using that phrase. We're in a holding bay. You know, as West Streeting, you know, has said, I can't do everything overnight. Stick with me. Everything will come good, or words to that effect. Do you believe him?
Well, it's good to be with you, Ian, as always. Thank you. So I have a couple of thoughts, main thoughts on this. One, yeah, it's always good for patients to have information, isn't it? So that they can feel more informed and are able to hopefully make better choices. But I also worry, Ian, a little bit contradictory to what your previous guest was just saying, that the government will try and use this by saying, well, it's local issues that are purely to do with the ones at the bottom, because look at these ones at the top. Look at how well they're performing under this government. And I just worry that this is going to be used not as a spur, but as an excuse for not putting in the resources that are needed.
And that's the question. That's the point I was saying to Dean. You know, what does that look like when we say resources? Are we talking about personnel, more clinicians? Are we talking about more beds? Are we talking about more machinery? I know there's a regular a scandal on scan machines. You know, the fact that scanners themselves could be the holy grail to so many elements of treatment, and hospitals are short of them. Is it that? What is it?
I think it's all of that, but I have to say, and I know this is where me and you perhaps part ways, Ian, we certainly have done before, but I believe we need significantly more investment. This is a major health service for a Western democracy of tens of millions of people who are living older, which is fantastic in many ways, but are therefore, you know, getting more and more illnesses and problems. And I think it needs significantly more investment. We at Just Treatment would like to see it go up to the European average. The past Labour government under Tony Blair managed that. We hope this one under Keir Starmer and West Streeting manages that too.
Are you optimistic?
Not particularly. I mean, I have to say that, you know, I met with Mr. Streeting back when he was Shadow Health Secretary to talk about what happened to my mum, and I won't repeat that again here. I've talked about it
I remember.
A lot. Thank you. He's not wanted to meet me since he's become Secretary of State. Now, he's a busy man, totally accept that. But, you know, I just think if he's not meeting with patient representatives, kind of, who is he meeting with, you know?
100%. We will report back when you do eventually meet him, though, Matthew. Thank you for your time. Matthew Hulbert, patient leader at Just Treatment. Thank you to him. Over to you on that one. I mean, is it the... the bit I can't work out, when anyone talks about changing the NHS, significantly changing, and West Streeting, I think, is a bit more relaxed, much like the Blair administration, about using elements of the private healthcare system, which, by the way, is not a catch-all response. Just because you employ some private health components to it, whether that's in specific treatment or some other area in this broad spectrum of things you need to make a health service run. But depending on what you use, could be hugely beneficial. But when you mention anything about changing health, for some reason, I don't know why people do this, it's very, very annoying when somebody says, Reform UK, they're going to sell off the NHS. It's never been said, no intention of doing that. It's about how we fund the NHS. Even if you say an insurance-type policy, people automatically go to, so you're going to make it like an American system. Well, there's dozens and dozens of healthcare systems around the world. Many of them are better than ours, and they're not the American system. If you look across the pond at outcomes in France or Germany or Spain, they are in many areas superior to us. Their treatment is still fundamentally free from cradle to grave, but they just have a different way of financing it. I think in Germany, I think I'm right in saying the private sector own the buildings or something like that, and an insurance thing kicks in. So there's different ways of doing it. Would you not and I'm pretty sure any health secretary has thought about this, but if you're running the Department of Health, would you not look around the world and go, right, what's the best one? Oh, it's over there. There it is. Sweden. Yeah, we'll have that one. I want that one. Would you do that? Because I think you might. There must be a reason why. Just copy that, whatever they're doing, do it. Doubtless this comes down to differences in what various countries suffer from. So maybe we have a disproportionate number of people suffering certain very chronic and tricky illnesses. I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud here. Maybe it's that. Perhaps it would just be too expensive. Could it be as simple as that? 0344 499 1000. Gary says, since 1997, this is reference to the coalition question, we've had 14 years of Conservative government and 14 of Labour. And look at the mess we're in. Do you really think it would work out better if the two of them got together to run the country? It's a very good question. I think we all know the answer. Peter says, not a political subject, but who does the guitar riff on the theme tune of your station? Who does the guitar riff? I think, I might be wrong, but there's an old rock chick called Claire Telford who I think can pick up a guitar when she feels like it. I think I heard a rumour that she did it. I could be wrong. Maybe we'll try and find out. It's one of those things that I bet nobody knows the answer. Thank you for that, Peter. If we get the answer, we'll give it to you. Lines are open 0344 499 1000.
Well, Ed Miliband being branded an eco-hypocrite this morning in The Sun as well, because, of course, the Energy Secretary boasted in February that he'd installed a heat pump at his house. Now, I don't know who paid for that, but I can bet your bottom dollar that it was probably us. But it turns out that he's also got another property in Doncaster, South Yorkshire, and it's got a gas boiler in it. And he hasn't replaced the gas boiler. And worse than that, not only has he not replaced the gas boiler, but he's charged us for the bill.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Let's go back to your comments as well. By the way, just clocked this story. I think we'll probably end up doing a bit more on this tomorrow on the programme. I hope you're sitting down for this. Channel migrants are in line for millions of pounds in compensation from the Home Office for being unlawfully detained in inhumane conditions. Almost 200 asylum seekers have lodged legal claims for their unlawful detention and mistreatment by the Home Office on their arrival at the Manston Migrant Holding Centre near Dover. This is under the European Convention of Human Rights. Allegations include sexual assaults, physical abuse and theft of property by guards, as well as disease-ridden, dirty and cold conditions with outbreaks of diphtheria, scabies and forcible separation of families and denial of medical aid. The Home Office has refused to settle, forcing lawyers for the asylum seekers to pursue the claims in court for detaining them longer than 24 hours allowed by law. Standard compensation awards amount to about £500 per 24 hours of unlawful detention, but courts can hand out aggravated or exemplary damages. The Home Office estimates that 18,000 migrants went through Manston, which of course opens the door for even further compensation claims. I have no words. I think we'll explore that more tomorrow, but we welcome your comments. Let's go back to your calls. Sick days. Ian is in Bloxwich in the West Midlands. Ian, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm good, mate. How are you, sir?
Good as gold, thank you. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Sick pay. I'm self-employed decorator since 89, 37 years. So up until about 5 years ago, I'd worked out I'd had 2 days off ill. One of them was World Cup 98, the day after England lost to Argentina on penalties, which was a Wednesday night. So I drank too much, so I couldn't drive the next day. So I just
I remember it well. I remember that day well. I already knew it was a Wednesday as well, because I can remember exactly where I was. Yeah, it was grim.
Yeah, I know where I was as well. I was in the pub. The other one, I can't really remember it. So I don't know what it was.
But 2 days, and of course the fact that you're self-employed is
I don't get paid if I don't work.
I mean, it is that, isn't it? If you don't work, you don't get paid. Plus, I'm sure you don't want to let customers down.
Well, you get colds and flus and you get that kind of stuff. So you get to the doctors. If you can get a doctor, then they'll just tell you to drink plenty of water and just take paracetamol.
Of course. My dad, who did exactly what you do for a living, I honestly don't recall him ever being off ill until he got properly ill. And but up to that point, I don't think he. I'm 100% sure. Not in my memory anyway.
Up around about 5 years ago, then I was this mental health stuff as well. So I was struggling with the same depression, anxiety, especially as a working for yourself and all that kind of stuff. Working week to week, not knowing where the next payday is coming from, that kind of stuff. So I was struggling with that a bit. Just tried to blank it out, cracked on, keep working. Yeah. My wife noticed, told me to go to the doctors. So I went to the doctors. The doctor said that at that moment, I was going through a nervous breakdown.
Wow.
Which I just shrugged my shoulders with and just said, well, what does that mean? And he's, well, you need to take loads and loads of time off, Mr. Evans, and you need to do this, you need to do that. And I'm like, well, I can't, because I don't get paid.
Yeah.
I don't get any sick pay. I don't get anything. So I was back at work the next day. I was painting the outside of somebody's house off a ladder, and the old bloke there was bringing me cups of tea. I was in the back of the van sobbing my eyes out. I couldn't work out why. Wow. I was trying to cover it up. I just had to carry on. So I did carry on. Then they diagnosed it with ADHD. So then I had to fight for medication for that. So still couldn't take any time off work. And then I got diagnosed with, I think it's called fibromyalgia or something, which at the same time, then a couple of months after that, a truck pulled out of me. I went straight through the side of him, 50 miles an hour, in my van, wrecked the van, 2 slip discs in the back, wrecked right shoulder, neck, permanent whiplash damage. I'd already got arthritis in my spine, so I had a week off, and then I could barely walk. Then I had to go back to work. I was wallpapering the staircase. I could barely stand up and stuff, but I had to get back to work because I was going to go bankrupt. I was going to lose the house. So it just cracked on.
I'll tell you what, you got your national insurance contributions back, didn't you, in that little chunk of time?
Well, yeah, I mean, somebody told me to claim for PIP. You see, so I've never took anything from the state. I've never signed on. I've never been unemployed. Yeah. I've always found work. I've always gone and worked. So I did it for a bit of a experiment. And twice I tried and twice I failed because they told me that because I could dress myself and because I could use the toilet, then I wasn't eligible. So I thought, well, it's not disability benefits. I'm still working. But they said, oh no, you can't. You can't have anything.
Wow.
So the fact is that if I start work, the depression and the anxiety will get a lot worse when the mortgage payments come around.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Plus as well, I can't see why people... The worst thing I could ever think of, if with depression and anxiety, is being stuck at home, lost in your own thoughts.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Terrifies me.
I'm sure. Look, I know there are some people who have it so bad they literally can't lift a leg out of bed. That's a slightly different league, right? And I get that, and I sympathise with that.
I'm on different jobs all the time.
But you're,
so I'm meeting different people all the time.
I think that has to be, it's got to be seen as a positive, right?
So I'm talking to people in houses, cups of tea, cakes, everything thrown at me, the lot, and everybody's talking about politics and football and the state of this, the state of that, taking the mickey, winding people up, having a good laugh, and then everything just disappears for a bit. And I just couldn't not work. I really couldn't.
And I get that and understand it completely. I mean, it's and the fact that you went back to work, not just, of course, because of your financial considerations, but as you say, it's got to be better for your head. Who do you support, by the way, Ian?
The mighty Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Do you really? Yeah. Just remind us just remind us where you are in the Premier League at the moment. Is there a polite way of saying bottom?
We're second in the league. Whichever league you're looking at is the wrong league. We're second.
I love it.
We're second in the league. Yeah. We are second in the league. Keep saying it.
Keep saying it, and it'll happen. Yeah, name it and claim it. I love it. Ian, great to talk, mate. Thank you very much indeed for that. I will talk to Guy in Northumberland shortly. Don't go away, Guy. This comes from Bob, who said, why on earth would anyone with an ounce of common sense support a Labour-Tory coalition? Both parties are proved individually they are lazy, useless and incompetent. To vote for a combined party of the above means you have to be a total moron. I sense Bob is right. I don't think you could even form an argument against what Bob's just said. Dave in Milton Keynes says, first-time texter, the NHS list. There are so many teaching hospitals in the bottom 50. Surely they should be all nearer the top. If they're not being taught properly, what chance have they got? It's a fair point as well. We'll have more from you in a couple of moments' time. It's 3:30. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 0344 499 1000. Let's have a look at this story then. The BBC. The BBC cannot guarantee it won't be rocked by more toxic scandals. Is it possible to have any more? This is according to Tim Davie, admitted today. He was talking to a group of MPs. Of course, he insisted he's not mucking around in rooting out abusers. Just months after Greg Wallace was sacked over sexual misconduct claims facing MPs, Davie was also grilled on the need to serve reform voters. The Gaza documentary was on the list as well, and Bob Villan's controversial Glastonbury coverage. Let's have a little listen to some of that hearing when the Director General faced the MPs.
And at that point, I knew absolutely that it was an anti-Semitic broadcast. So my decision was to get that off on demand. Simple as that. I mean, it wasn't too complicated in my mind, OK? And to your point, I do think it was deeply disturbing. Deeply disturbing. I mean, personally, I've talked to many people about this. I thought it was deeply disturbing what happened. I mean, the BBC made a very significant mistake, very significant in broadcasting that. But, you know, the fact that those words were broadcast to that broad audience, it was, frankly, very, to your point, it was disturbing.
It was disturbing. Rebecca Ryan is campaign director at Defund the BBC. Afternoon to you, Rebecca. I mean, I'm not suggesting he's not acknowledging it, but when he says it was disturbing, it kind of slightly underplays what actually happened there.
It really does. I think I mean, the pair of them there, Samir and Tim, were just sort of squirming, weren't they, under these questions, but sort of desperately trying to get back to that comfort zone of, you know, well, it's the BBC, we all love the BBC, yeah, just to say that the way they talked about that, it didn't quite sum up. I mean, Samir in the past has said that it's a dagger in the heart of the BBC's credibility, and I think that is closer to the mark of what the public think about letting those comments be aired at Glastonbury. And the thing is that what people want is for the BBC to start taking accountability and not just sort of say, oh, you know, we messed up again, yet another thing, no, it's okay, you know, haven't got a toxic culture, it's okay, you know, we've got things in hand, and then yet again something else happens.
Have they got a toxic culture, or are they, the defence that is often given is, look, they're absolutely massive. They're massive in this country, but they're massive globally. If you have that many thousands of people and all the offshoots, you know, you look at the Greg Wallace story, yes, the BBC broadcast it, they don't make it. That's the case with many programmes. If you put all of that together, there's monolithic array and strands, there's more tentacles than you can think of, then they're going to have a proportion of stinky moments in there. That would be their defence, and they're not disproportionately represented at the BBC no more than anywhere else. In fact, some argue they're underrepresented compared to other broadcasters. What do you say to that?
I'd say that it certainly is more of these scandals that happened at the BBC than at any of the other broadcasters, and it's because they have this culture of sort of this middle-class dinner party mindset that they've got going on, where they think they're safe to say these things, and it's only once sort of one thing slips through the cracks that everyone jumps on and goes, hang on a minute, you can't broadcast that, that's absolutely outrageous. And then they're like, oh yes, because these are things that they would talk about. And you're right, it's a huge organisation, and for them to try and make a huge cultural change is going to be nigh on impossible. But that's why we would say you need to get rid of the TV licence, because the British people don't want to be forced to pay for this, you know, mistake after mistake after mistake. And if they were just sort of answerable to paying customers in whatever form, subscription or advertisement or whatever, then people could switch off and not pay for them. But if you watch any live broadcast TV at all, whether that's Sky News or, you know, any other live broadcast TV, then you're forced to pay for the BBC. So you can't really vote with your feet unless you stop watching live broadcast.
I mean, the sort of, not even elephant in the room, there's just the most obvious thing here is it's no longer possible, even if you park the kind of errors and what's happened with the Gaza documentary and the like. Even if you put all that to one side, just the existence of the BBC in its form, it's not just notionally, it's literally impossible to defend in the 21st century. The only argument I used to come up with about 10 years ago when we talked about this kind of stuff, Rebecca, was a romantic one about Saturday nights watching Doctor Who, The Generation Game and Parkinson with a bit of Starsky and Hutch thrown in, which is no argument at all for running a multi-million pound business. I mean, and now when you consider what we have out there, whether it's Apple TV, Amazon, Netflix, Disney, etc., I mean, I don't know how anyone with a straight face could ever defend its existence.
Absolutely, and anybody with children or sort of teenagers or young people in their family knows that the young people aren't watching, they're not sitting or waiting to have content broadcast to them, so there's no way they're going to be paying for license fees when they set up their own homes. And one of the things that the BBC is actually sort of doing okay out of is the fact that so many young people are still having to live in their parental homes because they can't afford to get their own places. But once they do strike out and are able to do that, then they won't be getting TV licenses because they don't watch any live broadcast TV. So they've got this sort of huge issue that's coming down the line for the BBC where they can't keep justifying it. And it's really frustrating to see Tim Davie and Samir Shah, they're sort of almost businesses trying to push this business as usual narrative. Yes, we've made some mistakes, but you're going to let us carry on. They are heading into oblivion. I think it was Michael Portillo who said that they're like a polar bear clinging onto a receding piece of ice. It's getting smaller and smaller. Older people who typically get the license are moving on to other realms, and young people aren't paying for it, and soon there'll be nobody left who's prepared to pay for this.
Indeed. Only Portillo would get a net zero comment into a piece about the BBC, wouldn't he? But that's a whole other story. Listen, I mean, to me, the Gaza documentary thing was utterly jaw-dropping. I mean, that, I thought, was, of all the things on the list, if somebody said to me, look, the Bob Villain thing, they should have cut the feed, they didn't. All right, OK, they weren't quick enough, they took it off iPlayer, I get it. The Greg Wallace thing, all right, they didn't make it and nobody really knew, blah, blah, blah. But the Gaza documentary was Premier League when it comes to journalistic howlers. I mean, it was obscenely, criminally remiss in everything from the checks and balances. That bit, what you said at the very beginning, the kind of people that work at the BBC would not even, I think even if it was checked, they would have been OK with it. That's the point.
Absolutely. Like I say, it's this sort of mentality that they all have in this sort of echo chamber of their dinner party mindset where, they wouldn't see any problem because everybody, obviously, in their view, is very comfortable with sympathising deeply with Palestine, and therefore we can sort of gloss over all of those issues. And that's, as you say, one of the sort of startling issues that the BBC, that they allowed that documentary to be made in the way that it was, and nobody thought to check. It's outrageous.
Unbelievable. Well, we're going to watch with interest. I tell you what, Rebecca, in 10 years' time, you and I will never be having this conversation again because it simply can't survive.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's what we're going for.
Listen, Rebecca, thank you for your time. Rebecca Ryan, Campaign Director at Defund the BBC. I don't know what form you could put the BBC in. Some people say, well, why don't you just let them do news and nothing else? There's a whole raft of problems with that. If you said, right, let's get rid of everything the BBC does or put it on a streaming service that you pay for like anything else, I don't know how many people would pay. I don't know whether it would be in, I can't imagine it would be in the same kind of numbers as a Netflix or a Disney. Or you say, well, we'll have a smaller TV licence. The TV licence will be 20 quid a year, and that will fund objective, non-commercial news. So it's free from any potential kind of financial, as in sponsorship, implications. There's no paymaster above other than the taxpayer. So you get into all of that. One of the problems, I won't bore you too much about this, but journalistically and working in the commercial world as I have, apart from about 5 minutes when I worked at the BBC, pretty much all my life I've worked in commercial radio. And it's very, very difficult for the commercial world, not just in broadcasting, but in newspapers, in magazines, to make money these days. And so when the taxpayer gives the BBC tens of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds in order to make news, you are also taking money away. I mean, look at their website, for example. They have this, just God knows how much it costs to run and keep and how many people work on it. You look at all of that, that's funded by the taxpayer. If I wanted tomorrow in a first world democracy to start a news web page, I'd be absolutely stuffed. And my first point of being stuffed would be the existence of the BBC. Now, there's a good argument to say, well, that's just not fair, is it? It's not fair that I cannot take on the BBC because the BBC are funded by the government, the taxpayer. So they get that's an advantage. That's an advantage that in any other world would go against all competition rules that you would set out in business. And that's one I feel quite strongly about, because it is hard for local newspapers are royally stuffed and all that, you know, BBC stuff. I know they try to do the regional thing. Some elements of the BBC website even try to put on local newspaper reports so that they're seen to acknowledge that there are other companies out there trying to make. It's just hard at any level to really defend it, you know? So even if you said 20 quid a year, all you get is news, nothing else, all you're going to pay for. I get the idea, it's still unfair. And it's a massive unfairness to everyone else trying to make money and hire people and the like. Guy is in Northumberland. Back to that issue of sick days. Guy, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure.
I wanted to add probably a little bit of a different context to this. I mean, I'm probably the first one that would say that, you know, don't take a chance, don't take a day off work and book that down as mental health, because I don't agree with that. But the risk that you run is that you undermine a real problem. And it's a problem that is getting worse. And unless we tackle it, it's only going to get worse for employers and it's going to get worse for employees.
Yeah.
But, you know, just to put this into context, back in 2021, the cost of mental health to the UK economy was about £50 billion every year. That's more than doubled now. So it's over £100 billion.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? It's not a bit of an increase. It's an industrial scale increase of such massive implications for the economy and the taxpayer and the individuals concerned.
Yeah, and the problem is it's one of the, it doesn't show up on a balance sheet. So it's not something that an employer can quantify. Yeah. And that's one of the big issues. And I think one of the things that we've got to really do is to look at what are the drivers. I was listening to one of your previous callers who was self-employed, and I tell you what, my heart went out to the guy because, you know, I know exactly what that feels like.
100%.
And, you know, the argument that we've just got to crack on works to a point where until you can crack on no more and you just can't go to work.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to be really careful that while there are those that do take a chance, and that's not acceptable, what it could potentially do is undermine and undervalue this real issue that employers are facing into.
Correct.
And businesses are ill-equipped and ill-prepared because you ask 10 employers and you say to them, okay, who's struggling with mental health in your workplace? What are they struggling with, and how can you help them?
Yeah.
9.5 of them will say, we have no idea. And in fact, the first indication we have that there was a problem was when someone went off sick or they left the organization or, you know, something worse happened. So it's a real issue. We can't ignore that. And we've really got to provide organizations with better visibility, and we've got to provide employees with better access. You know, having a 6-month waiting list to speak to someone is not acceptable. You know, we can't be doing that. Because all that happens is that people just clam up and the situation then manifests in a physical ailment, and it's now got to a point where people can't work. You know, they want to come to work, but they can't. So we've just got to be really careful with that and not dismiss it and say, oh, these are people taking a chance. And I agreed with your comment earlier where you said, you know, taking a day off because you're not feeling great isn't mental health. You're absolutely right. That isn't mental health. But just have a look around in your studio and have a look around at the people that you're engaging with and you interact with, people are on the edge. You know, things are getting worse and people are on the edge. And it isn't until they hit that brick wall that things go wrong. And we've really got to change it. We've got to turn that around. Otherwise, you know, we're going to be having this conversation next year again.
We are. We're going to have this conversation, and it's going to be, you know, the figures will be far worse than they currently are at the moment, and not just a little bit worse, but so significantly that you end up going, this is a kind of a national emergency. I mean, in terms of the numbers required in order to just feed the budget in the welfare department, it's off the scale. Guy, I've got to move, but thank you. You've been a great caller, really informative stuff. On this point, Susan says, one of the reasons there's so much sickness in the country is because of the overcrowded existence we live in. London is like watching a colony of ants. Everywhere you go is packed to capacity with people from all over the globe passing on their viruses from one person to another. Most people don't even cover their mouths when they cough and sneeze. Oh, that's outrageous when people do that. On a train, somebody sneezes, like full pelt. One of those bloke sneezes that you don't have to do. You know, that you kind of sneeze one way or the other. You can slightly hold it and modify your sneeze, the velocity of your sneeze. And some people just give it a go, and then they cough at the same time. I know people who do that. What's with the big cough as you're sneezing? That's just acting out a big, bad sneeze. But if you do have to do that, put your hands up, you filthy git. 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you coming next on Talk, and a moment here to reflect on what you could have in your bank account over the next few months. This is beautiful. Biggest competition to date, and it's now live, giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. Plus Oasis tickets. 2 lucky winners will win a pair of Oasis tickets. They return to Wembley on the 27th of September. So that alone is a reason to take part. Man alive. Those tickets are... you just can't get them. Plus, that's not all. Alongside the tickets, we're giving one lucky listener the chance to win that huge £25,000. Let's have a listen to all the details on how you can enter. Here it is.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word cash to 83338 and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission. Or you can enter for free by calling 0330 880 338. All entries must be received by the 19th of September at 9 a.m. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Ed Miliband being branded an eco-hypocrite this morning in The Sun as well, because, of course, the Energy Secretary boasted in February that he'd installed a heat pump at his house. Now, I don't know who paid for that, but I can bet your bottom dollar that it was probably us. But it turns out that he's also got another property in Doncaster, South Yorkshire, and it's got a gas boiler in it. And he hasn't replaced the gas boiler. And worse than that, not only has he not replaced the gas boiler, but he's charged us for the bill.
What a disaster that would be. I'm sorry, but Emily Thornberry is just the biggest snob in British politics, as far as I can tell. We all remember when she sneered at White Van Man, who had his flag flying out his front room window. We all remember that she went around dressed up as the EU flag because she was so depressed that the working classes of this country dare to vote to leave the European Union. She looks down her nose at ordinary people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This one comes from Margaret, who says, "Afternoon, Ian. I had a phone call from a local MP, a Lib Dem. I complained about illegals coming here and wanted their opinion on the subject. I told them 1,000 arrived at the weekend. She asked where I heard that from. I told her talkTV. She told me I mustn't watch Talk. Says it all, Ian. I eventually told her I agree to disagree. Help us if they believe God help us if they believe the BBC. Great show. I mean, even the BBC reported it. I love the idea that she's an MP and didn't know that stat. It comes from the Home Office. It's literally the government official statistic. So if anything, it probably underplays it. Let's talk to John, who's in the Dordogne. Afternoon to you, John.
Afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. What are you thinking?
Thank you, sir. With this business of the Conservatives and the Labour Party joining is total madness. It's just never ever going to happen. You've got one party that sort of is loyal, and you've got the other party that's just a bunch of communist traitors.
Wonder what you're going to say then.
Yeah, I know. What do the Conservatives and Reform sing at the end of their party political conferences? God save the King.
Mm-hmm.
What do the Labour Party sing? Keep
God
the
save
flag flying.
Karl Marx or something. Yeah, keep the red flag flying. Man alive.
I mean, there are a lot of them.
The problem is, and I think we have more of those kind of mad lefty MPs than we've had than ever. Because obviously, you know, Blair did his bit to try and kind of change all of that, sort of. But in the intervening years, you know, trade unions and all sorts of people have funded some of these characters.
Dennis Healy, he was in the British Army.
Yep.
Fought through the war.
I know. Yeah, and these people have kind of, you know, been to a few union rallies, got angry about anyone who's, you know, worth more than 300 quid.
I read somewhere that Starmer actually attended a Czechoslovakian communist, I don't know what it was, a training camp when he was in his teens.
Quite possible. I might have heard something about that. I might have heard something. Listen, John, I have to move for no other reason than Jeremy Kyle has just walked in the studio.